Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer. I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1600 of the War News stream. And tonight we have so much news, it's kind of even hard to even go over a summary of it. But to give the best attempt right now, we're seeing that U.S. forces just launched a huge attack on Iranian missile sites and oil facilities, hitting one of the largest petrochemical complexes within Iran, and also striking deeper into Iranian territory. Right now, this very minute, by the way, we are seeing the Gulf states are under a huge Iranian attack. Also, Jordan's under an attack, and apparently there is a major battle taking place near the Strait of Hormuz between the commercial ships, the U.S. Navy, and all those other forces as well. So a lot of stuff with that. Also, we're seeing a major disaster erupt at an oil depot in Russia. Crimea has also issued a distress call for help, and right now, Moscow is under a direct attack by the Ukrainians, and it's a ton of news, as you can tell, but it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news from around the world here on our Sunday night fundraiser, as we have been able to hear significant and major developments around the entirety of the world, especially from the ongoing war in Iran and also the ongoing war in Ukraine as well. As currently the United States of America's armed forces within CENTCOM's area of responsibility and the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran, including the IRGC, have both been conducting significant waves of strikes against each other over the course of this day. Currently, the United States of America is still conducting a significant armed strike campaign and airstrike campaign against the Islamic Republic of Iran, striking critical infrastructure and military facilities deep inside of Iran, including the capital of Tehran. And we've also been able to hear that there have been strikes along the coastline as well on significant IRGC and Iranian military installations from east to west along the southern Iranian coastline. The Iranians are also currently launching a ballistic missile counterattack as we speak right now, with a large amount of ballistic missiles appearing to have just been fired at the the Muwafaq Salti Air Base within Jordan, and we've also been able to confirm that multiple strikes have been conducted over the course of the day in Kuwait and Bahrain specifically, and that there is confirmed damage on the ground inside of Kuwait, as it does appear that Iranian missiles have been able to impact their targets at least 3 times over the course of the day. That satellite imagery is already starting to show that there have been several somewhat significant hits throughout the Middle East from the Islamic Republic of Iran's missile forces. Still, the United States of America and Iran do appear to be in the full-blown war once more and are trading blow for blow, jab for jab at this point inside of the Middle Eastern regions. We've also been able to hear additionally within the state of Ukraine and the ongoing war with the Russian Federation, the situation in Crimea has become so bad that the Crimean people, particularly of the northern part of the peninsula, are now beginning to write open letters of distress and begging the Russian government for some sort of support or relief, as the situation has now become completely hopeless within these areas, and most of these cities have reported that they have had no fuel, food, or water for nearly an entire week at this point, and the situation somehow is only getting worse as each day passes. The Russian Federation has also seen that due to the significant strikes posed by the Ukrainian armed forces, that the very little ships that are left in the Sea of Azov are attempting to try and make it to safe refuge within the port of Temryuk along the Russian mainline's coast, yet still Ukrainian drones rain fire from above and are continuing to knock out and heavily damage Russian ships who find themselves to be unfortunate enough to still be within the Sea of Azov as of today. We've also been able to hear that major attacks have been conducted by Ukrainian long-range drone attack forces within the area of Stavropol, with a major fuel depot getting hit and burning as of this moment. We've also been able to see that the Sizran refinery has taken serious damage, and we were able to get additional footage today from yesterday's attack showing the drones heading in completely unopposed in terms of the air defense. That is not to say that the Russian air defenses are not trying, however, which we will get into later on. We've also been able to see that the front lines have held quite well today by the Ukrainian armed forces, and significant casualties have been inflicted against the Russian Federation's offensives within the Donbass area, and we've also seen the Ukraine has continued to keep a firm and resolute stance on the front line and stop any attempts by the Russian Federation to gain any footholds or additional breakthroughs. With all of this news in mind, we're going to be making sure to cover all of it, starting with our largest stories first from the Middle East and moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night, and intermittently we may have breaking news coming out from time to time throughout the stream. And it actually looks like we have some of that coming out right now. So Matthew, what do we got?
So who would have guessed it? Breaking news right at the very beginning. I imagine we'll have a hell of a lot of breaking news tonight. Right now we're seeing that explosions are being reported inside of Kuwait. That's happening right now. We're also seeing explosions inside of Bahrain. Also, direct hits at the U.S. Navy 5th Fleet headquarters, which appears to be the punching bag once again tonight during this attack. We're also seeing in the meantime that Iran has launched a brand new wave of missiles from the Jam missile city toward U.S. forces in Bahrain a few moments ago. And also, we're hearing of some more explosions in Bahrain as well. And also, Jordan right now is fighting for its life at the Muwafaq Air Base, and they're currently under a major attack by several and probably even maybe up to a dozen Iranian missiles. So that's quite a lot right there. We're also seeing that maybe the U.S. is conducting a counterattack on Iran from the looks of it. It appears to be that the Khuzestan province is under some sustained fire we're hearing about right now. So that's also going on at the same time. So we're literally getting a picture after picture of dozens of missiles being fired from Iranian missile cities across the Iranian territory. And these are some very large blow-for-blow attacks that we're seeing tonight. The war is truly spiraling back out of control very quickly in less than 48 hours. But Enforcer, that is the breaking news.
And it does appear that at the moment there has been significant actions by the Islamic Republic of Iran from their ongoing missile attacks, which we were able to report were ongoing during our intro. And it does appear that some missiles are still inbound towards the area of the Kingdom of Bahrain. We've already been able to hear of explosions within Kuwait, possibly of direct impacts or in-air interceptions over the country. And we are also hearing that missiles are still inbound at this moment to the Muwafaq Salti Air Base within eastern Jordan. And we're most likely expecting those missiles to be entering the airspace of Jordan within the next several minutes, with air defense fire soon to follow after that. There is a lot of developments that are currently happening within the Middle East, and we're going to be making sure to lay out the story as it is unfolded over the past 24 hours, at least the best we can. It's largely just evolved into both sides conducting major strikes against each other, and this small skirmish that started, well, major skirmish that started yesterday, has spiraled out of control back into a full-blown war between both sides, as we've seen that U.S. forces have struck quite literally almost everywhere within Iran, especially along the southern coastline and the capital of Tehran. And we're also seeing that the Islamic Republic of Iran is firing at U.S. bases everywhere within the region, except for Israel and Saudi Arabia currently. So moving us on into our major news, we have been able to see that the United States Armed Forces earlier this morning had started a new wave of strikes against the forces of the IRGC and the Iranian military along the entirety of the coastline. Earlier in the morning, the governor of Qashem Island reported that 10 to 11 projectiles had struck the island and all were targeting military sites. No casualties were reported at the time, although we know that there are definitely casualties from the military facilities. We also were able to see a brief clip earlier in the morning showing the smoke rising from Qashem Island and giving us a small glimpse at the scope and scale of the destruction that was caused by the first U.S. strike wave that occurred this morning. We see multiple different smoke plumes billowing from the ground.
Yeah, and also Qashem Island, that's the main island, like right next to the Iranian toll booth, isn't it? Where the ships go through and Iran collects the money. That's where they go through, I think.
Yeah, they actually they actually pass along the southern coast of Qashem, and then they either go north of Larak Island or south of Larak Island, making their way through the Strait of Hormuz. So this is a fairly significant area, at least for the Iranians to be able to control commercial shipping within the Strait of Hormuz, and it has taken quite severe hits earlier this morning by U.S. armed forces in the direct attacks of the U.S. Air Forces within the area. There's also been some reports that the U.S. Navy has been involved. To what degree, we do not know. It does seem that videos have come out prior from CENTCOM showing that Tomahawk cruise missiles have once again been fired at the Iranians, but we're not sure as to the number or degree of the involvement of the U.S. Navy and the missiles being fired from them that are hitting these targets. We're attributing most of these strikes to the United States Air Force or the United States Naval Air Arm. We also were able to hear that during that same time, there were explosions that were happening in Surik, and we were able to see a picture of one of the third wave of attack, well, the second wave of attacks the U.S. conducted today on Surik, showing one of the large explosions that occurred on the naval facility north of the town of Surik, which appears to be the rising of the early morning sun. So we can assume that Surik naval facility has taken some significant damage in the second wave of strikes, and we also were able to hear of reports earlier on the day, once again confirming that the U.S. military had conducted another wave way earlier on in the day at the same time the strikes were happening in Qashem against Surik again, meaning that Surik has been hit several times throughout the day from what we can account, and it appears from everything that we were able to gather, there have largely been 3 rounds of strikes, major rounds of strikes by the United States today, and of all 3 of those strikes, Surik has been hit every single one of those 3 times. We also were able to hear confirmation from the area of Bandar Ijask that last night's round of strikes by the United States did kill Hamad Reza Dagan, who was a naval air defense officer of the Islamic regime's army, and he was eliminated last night in airstrikes that were conducted against the town of Bandar Ijask in the Hormuzgan province. This is one of the first confirmed fatalities on the Iranian side that we are able to name, as most of the individuals who have been killed so far in the U.S. airstrikes are military personnel, but they are not of significant enough rank for the Iranians to publish their names and faces to the general public. However, the Iranians did make a particular mention of this officer and stated that he had martyred himself in the name of the Islamic Republic of Iran, finally giving us at least one name and also letting us know that apparently it was a significant commander of an air defense battery around Jas that was killed in that airstrike last night, showing that the U.S. is going out of its way at this point to conduct what could be described as suppression of enemy air defense operations as the spearhead of the air campaigns that we're seeing right now throughout the region. And CENTCOM footage that has been published throughout yesterday and today, there has been a significant amount of video showing that air defense or surface-to-air missile defense sites have been getting hit heavily by U.S. Air Forces, more so than any other target that we've seen along the coast at this point. This appears to be showing us that the United States is beginning the military operations largely from the ground up as far as the war is concerned, and is attempting to target, much like it is literally day one of a war, and we've never gone to war with Iran up until this point, we're attempting to target the air defenses to clear them out, to be able to open up the airspace to allow for more successful air campaigns and deeper and longer duration air campaigns into the Islamic Republic of Iran, considering that almost all of these attacks, at least as far as the U.S. is concerned, have to fly over the southern coast of Iran to be able to make it deeper into their country. And it does appear that some aircraft are already making what could be described, at least at the moment, as the possibly dangerous voyage deep into Iran, although it's not excessively dangerous as long as they remain at incredibly high altitudes of 30,000 feet or higher. They're generally out of manpad range and those sorts of distances and altitudes, but we have been able to see that Tehran has come under attack today, and we do have a little bit of footage showing us the anti-air fire over the city, and we also are able to hear of jet activity over the city as well. We also were able to hear reports that apparently U.S. raids are targeting industrial and economic areas, including petrochemical facilities within the Islamic Republic of Iran, of which a large number of them have been hit along the coastline. We've also been able to hear that the Islamic Republic of Iran stated that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is warning for months that the Gulf states should not become a playground for the enemy, as in the United States, and that their patience has run out, signaling that imminent attacks aimed directly at the Gulf states were going to be occurring incredibly soon after that statement had been issued. We believe that the round of missile strikes that are happening live on air right now are possibly attempting to be aimed directly at Gulf states forces and Gulf states nations rather than the U.S. military facilities that are within those countries. Still, outside of these statements and these alerts out of Tehran, we also were able to hear of major U.S. critical infrastructure strikes that have been conducted, particularly around Bandar-e-Mashahar and also Bandar-Imam Khomeini. These cities are within the Khuzestan province of the Islamic Republic of Iran and serve as a critical port access for the Iranians to be able to ship out bulk aggregates and also some oil resources as well from these port cities. From what we understand, several strikes have been reported within the area of Bandar Imam Khomeini, as there has been several explosions reported in the area just minutes before we went live, and within Bandar-e-Mashahar, we've also been able to see reports that a petrochemical site within the city has also been hit. Interestingly enough, this petrochemical facility is right here. We were able to geolocate this right before the show, and the State of Israel's Air Force had already conducted strikes on this facility around 4.5 months ago, approximately, and was able to cause some damage to the fuel storage tanks in the northwestern area of the facility. We believe that this time around, the United States may be attempting to hit the remainder of the critical petrochemical resources, or more so structures within this facility, and may be attempting to knock it out permanently rather than cause just some minimal damage to the oil refineries and the processing plants within the area of Bandar-e-Mashahar and Bandar-Imam Khomeini.
You know what's interesting is the Mashahar Petrochemical Complex, which is the official name of this location that was struck. It's actually not an oil refinery. It's more of a sprawling industrial hub that has about 50 different distinct plants within it. This is a very large facility. It's a complex of several different areas within this hub right here. And it's mainly in charge of producing basic chemicals, polymers, and fertilizers to a large degree. So they don't necessarily actually refine, like, gasoline and diesel here. They create all kinds of other petrochemical products, which is very critical to the Iranian economy. So this is an economic target by all means.
And it certainly is an economic target, and one that may cripple the Islamic Republic of Iran's economic longevity, and we do understand that the current U.S. campaign appears to be attempting to isolate the Iranians from any ability to generate revenue, and therefore raise funds for a continued conflict against the United States of America. We were able to see that before the full-scale conflict has broken out in the past 36 hours, that the United States of America conducted a strike on a railway bridge near to Ak-Kala, a city within northern Iran, near to the area of the Caspian Sea, where this particular railroad bridge was targeted and hit by 2 Tomahawk cruise missiles fired most likely by the United States Navy within the northern Arabian Sea. These strikes were able to destroy and sever one of Iran's only mainline rail accesses outside of Iran that traveled through Central Asia and either to the Russian Federation or the People's Republic of China, showing that we were attempting to destroy, at least before the war, Iran's overland transport corridors, and now in the current part of the war, we are now attempting to destroy their critical infrastructure as their port facilities and whatnot, to be able to ensure that even sea access and sea transport for trade will no longer be accessible or available to the Islamic Republic of Iran. This could start to see that significant economic damage is caused more acutely to the Iranian government than the larger Iranian economy, as the Iranian government relies heavily on the excises and fees made off of the shipments from these ports and the operation of the port authorities, as well as the railroads, to be able to generate revenue from foreign trade. Foreign trade, by and large, is one of the largest money-generating processes that a nation can undertake, meaning that the United States is attempting to go at Iran's largest purse, if we want to call it that, which is their trade with foreign nations. So we do understand that that is the current strategy, at least in part right now, and we'll have to see over the next few days and most likely weeks, as this strike campaign will most likely be going on for weeks at a minimum, most likely months in reality, whether this starts to cause crippling damage to Iran in any immediate or short period of time. There is a likelihood that it may not.
Also, by the way, we do have some fresh footage showing the strikes on the U.S. Navy Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. It appears to be a larger attack than we saw last night that Iran conducted, but it is a very large plume of smoke coming off of it. So, if we could, let's take a quick look at this. This is inside of Bahrain at the U.S. Navy headquarters here.
We see the smoke rising. It looks like they may have hit a new building because that's clearly an ongoing fire of some sort. And that may be showing that an additional facility rather than the direct headquarters building has been hit. And to break down a little bit of quick analysis for y'all on the 5th Fleet headquarters and what we're seeing right now, it's a little bit hard to say, to be entirely honest, which building has been hit. But we do understand that the main headquarters buildings, which existed within the area of 5th Fleet headquarters, which is this entire pier, or more so port right here, was largely knocked down and destroyed in the opening days of the conflict. As far as strategic implications, there really is none to the destruction of the headquarters. The headquarters had been pre-evacuated by the United States Navy before the conflict even started on the 28th of February, 5 months ago, and we also understand that all surface combatants and submarines of the United States Navy were also pre-evacuated as well from this naval yard and were sent on out into the Arabian Sea and are now operating from other bases, either within the Indo-Pacific or within EUCOM's area of responsibility or even CENTCOM's area of responsibility, meaning that there's really no strategic significance in Iran hitting this facility. There are some U.S. personnel here, however, they're incredibly small, and they're largely just base security, making sure that people can't just break in the middle of the day and start trying to rack through valuable secrets that may have been left behind by the United States that couldn't be destroyed. So outside of base security and a couple of key personnel that have to keep up a minimum of operations at the facility, there's really no strategic impact to be seen from these attacks. And the Iranians seem to be quite apt for some reason in hitting this facility dozens of times, although it does not pose any real value to them in a military sense by conducting these strikes. A lot of people are also talking as well at this time about the U.S. beginning their strikes on the Iranian ports, which I have to remind you, while generally looking to be a coastal campaign at this moment, we also have to add in the fact that the railway bridge at Al-Kala was also knocked out before the conflict, which is showing us a larger overarching strategy at this point in our current strike campaign to try and knock out Iran's money-making capabilities in terms of foreign trade. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now, the possible success of it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so last night we had a very deep analysis of where the U.S. was going to go next with their strikes on Iran. And I was saying last night that I think the U.S. is left with no choice. They're going to start going for dual-use infrastructure. That's the next logical step because largely we're out of options in every other arena for the most part. So now we're seeing today that U.S. forces have begun striking Iranian airports, oil facilities, and other economic targets, including the petrochemical facility. So is that a good move? 70% said yes, it's a great move, while 14% said no, that is not a good move, and 9% said I'm 50-50 on this one. And I would say I think it's a great move. I think at this point there's really no other option. We have to start hitting the oil facilities inside of Iran. We have to start hitting the dual-use infrastructure because that's the only way to start bringing the Iranian regime to its knees. And it's kind of hard to go after the missile launchers and the other Iranian missile assets that are hidden away under the ground and in hardened shelters. It's too hard to get to that. So we need a very consistent, foolproof way to start putting the Iranian regime on blast, essentially. And I would say the way to do it is hitting this dual use infrastructure. Also, by the way, I see one or two people saying that's a war crime. It is not a war crime. That's misinformation. This is totally valid targets under the Geneva Convention. And these are dual use targets, half used for the military, half used for civilian. Therefore, it's a valid military target. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that this is a valid military target and it is a solid move. Generally, when we were speaking of the discussion last night, I'm heavily against the concept of knocking out power plants and things that are vital to the civilian population that pose no real strategic value in knocking out. However, knocking out a country's ability to trade in foreign markets via their land or sea trading routes, like the railway bridge at Alcala and also the ports along the southern coast, are incredibly vital in the acts of an ongoing war. Those areas are not frequented often by civilians and largely only serve as a profit-making machine for the Islamic regime. Considering that we are currently attempting to defeat the Islamic regime in a full-blown war, we need to be able to try and conduct every and all actions without in conducting undue suffering against the Iranian citizenry to see that the regime is brought to its knees. And depriving the Iranian government of any money-making capabilities is helping to bring them to their knees, and considering that they'll be taking on extreme spending to be able to deal with this ongoing conflict, that will also be quickly running out their coffers and generally their war chests, if we want to call it that, and these lacks of abilities to keep generating revenue, we'll also see that those war chests never replenish. They will be rapidly depleted, meaning that financially, this will start to make the war a lot less long in duration because they will not be able to afford to keep the war going for an incredibly long duration of time
Oh,
financially.
yeah. And that's extremely effective. Go ask Ukraine and Russia about that. Ukraine's been hitting the oil refineries and every economic target they can possibly get their drones to go take a hit on, and it's been very effective. Russia's been brought to its knees, and that's remarkable how much they've been brought to their knees over that. So if the U.S. does the same thing and they start hitting Iran like that, I would say that's totally valid, and I would say at this point it's pretty much called for because you can't negotiate with the Iranians. They're not backing down, and now the Iranians are using the funeral of Khamenei as a war cry to go back to war, and now we're seeing the whole thing spiral out of control, going blow for blow against the Iranians and the U.S., and the entire region is becoming an absolute hellstorm. So, in my opinion, we don't have an option left. That this is the next logical step.
I would say that this is the next logical step, but considering that we currently have a blockade at the entrance of the Gulf of Oman that's being reinstated, I would say that these sorts of strikes are not the necessary ones that we need to be conducting along the southern coast, and we should be conducting these attacks elsewhere with the same ferocity but on different targets, and those would be along the northern Iranian coast within the Caspian Sea. We cannot conduct a naval blockade due to the geographical difficulties given with the Caspian Sea, of which we cannot directly access it, to where Iran can trade with countries along the Caspian Sea, most importantly Russia, and can also access the Volga River as a result, taking the cargo or equipment, if you want to call it that, deep into Russia via the Volga, quite literally to the Ural Mountains itself. We need to see that the port facilities in the northern areas of Iran are targeted and destroyed and rendered inoperable, as that really is going to be Iran's moneymaker in the ongoing conflict, not the southern ports. We already have a blockade going on, meaning that outside of damaging these ports in the theoretical sense, the damage is already going to be inflicted economically by cutting off their sea routes and sea trade via our blockade. So hitting these ports doesn't really pose any additional damage, at least immediately. It's more so unrealized damage that would happen in a post-war scenario. We need to be hitting the ports that they can still trade out of freely, which are their northern ports along the Caspian Sea. So I would say that that generally should be our priority targets with these air campaigns, and I heavily applaud the actions that are being conducted in the suppression of enemy air defenses along the southern coast of Iran, and generally we should be viewing those as opening up the pathways to the Caspian Sea coastline to conduct strikes along the ports in the north instead of the south. Those are going to be a lot more beneficial at knocking out money-generating capabilities in the immediate here and now.
Yeah, maybe so. I would say so. It seems like though at this point, at the stage we're in the war right now, it's kind of hard to tell what the next step is actually going to be. Like obviously, I think the next step that we're seeing right now is dual use infrastructure strikes. That's what we're currently seeing at the moment. But you know, how far this escalates, that's the next question because we're seeing like been going over all night. These blow for blow attacks that are taking place are starting to become literally consistent, constant attacks between the two, where the U.S. lobs a huge strike, Iran responds to it, the U.S. lobs another one, then Iran responds back to it. So we're on Sunday night. The markets are about to open tomorrow morning. So it seems like the U.S. is planning on dragging this out for weeks, possibly, which is probably going to send the oil price crazy. It's going to send the stock market crazy. So it's once again spiraling. So I'm not really sure how bad it's going to get. Iran could start targeting the water infrastructure and the power infrastructure inside of the Gulf states. That's probably coming next, I'd imagine. So it's probably about to get really wild.
It probably is. Hopefully, we'll be able to see that the Gulf state nations have been able to get enough support from Ukraine to be able to deal with the incoming drone threats, or that Ukraine might be able to throw enough support their way to deal with that. Because if they don't have a way to deal with the incoming Iranian drones, which are most likely going to be following here soon, we could start to see the Iranians begin attacking critical infrastructure, such as power plants and water desalination plants in most Gulf state and Middle Eastern nations, which could start to cause significant repercussions for our alliance, and it could also sour the relations with our allies, of which we rely greatly on right now because we are basing our forces out of their countries to conduct these military operations against Iran, meaning that appeasing and keeping our allies comfortable within this area right now is of top priority for our sustainment of our military campaign. So hopefully we'll be able to see the United States is able to weigh that out, or is able to find a country like Ukraine that can allocate the resources that we need that are necessary right now to defend these nations from inevitable Iranian attacks. Otherwise, we could start to see that the situation is once again falling out of hand. But we have more breaking news coming out at the moment. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so we're getting some breaking news. It looks like the IRGC inside of Iran is issuing statements. Also, the U.S. CENTCOM is issuing statements as well. To summarize what CENTCOM said, we'll go over it in more detail in just a second. But CENTCOM is saying they completed another wave of strikes against Iran, and they're saying it's concluded as of about a minute ago. So that's what CENTCOM's saying from the U.S. side, and Iran's also putting out a statement. So, Enforcer, do you want to walk us through what Iran is claiming they've destroyed so far?
So first, folks, we're going to read the Iranian statement, and then we're going to go to CENTCOM's statement right after. And this is a statement from the IRGC. Command and Control Center of U.S. military's drone fleet in Bahrain was destroyed. The evil and warmongering American regime, which has rarely gone without war and military aggression since its inception, has not learned a lesson from its recent defeats in the face of Muslim fighters and continues its acts of aggression. In response to these acts of aggression, the IRGC's aerospace forces in the second phase of their reciprocal operations destroyed important helicopter maintenance and repair centers, a P-8 electronic warfare aircraft hangar, and the command and control center of the U.S. military's drone fleet at a U.S. base in Sheikh Isa, Bahrain. The reciprocal operation is ongoing. We cannot confirm at the moment that any strikes have been confirmed to have landed within the Sheikh Isa airfield at the moment, and that appears to largely be misinformation. It also appears that a decent amount of this information at the moment cannot be corroborated, as we have seen some Iranian strikes successfully landing on facilities within the Middle East, primarily within Jordan and Kuwait. But this sort of fantastical reporting of they have destroyed a myriad of targets within this one wave of strikes is highly unlikely. If they're lucky, they might have actually hit one of these targets dead on. In reality, they probably caused moderate damage to only a single one of the targets that's listed here in this report by the IRGC. They heavily over-exaggerate the success of their attacks. We've also been able to hear that CENTCOM has put out a statement as well, which is as follows. U.S. Central Command has completed a new wave of offensive strikes against Iran July 12th, hitting dozens of targets at multiple locations with precision munitions to degrade Iran's capability to continue attacking international shipping flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. CENTCOM forces struck Iranian military air defense systems, coastal radar sites, missile and drone capabilities, and small boats using U.S. fighter aircraft, naval vessels, one-way attack aerial drones, and one-way attack sea drones for the first time. The Strait of Hormuz is a vital maritime corridor for global trade. Iran does not control it. U.S. forces are postured and prepared to ensure that freedom of navigation remains available to commercial shipping despite Iran's continued unwarranted aggression, harassments, threats, and arbitrary declarations. We can also see that footage, I believe, shown. Actually, this is fresh footage. We will be showing y'all this here. This is apparently most likely from the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln or the USS George H.W. Bush, which are currently operating in theater. But here is the new footage from either one of these carriers, and I'll be trying to figure out what air squadron we're watching here, and therefore what aircraft carrier these are operating from. But without further ado, here's the footage provided by CENTCOM just minutes ago. We see them getting the aircraft up on deck and launching it. We also see more Tomahawks being launched. That almost sounded like an ambulance right there.
Is that a siren?
I'm not. I think it actually was an on-deck siren to warn any sailors that might, for some reason, be out there that a missile's about to fire. Usually, it plays for a little bit before the missiles are fired. A little bit interesting here, though. It literally sounded like an ambulance. And we can now see some of the strikes that have been conducted, and going through them one by one, we can see that once again, most if not all of them appear to be some form of drone launchers. We can actually see unassembled drones here on some sort of a rack near to an airbase ready to be launched, being hit in that strike. And in the next strike, we can see what appears to be possibly an air defense site also getting hit as well, along with another air defense site or an anti-ship missile, and some sort, it seems, of a radar system or electronic warfare unit being hit somewhere along the coast as well. And for some reason, a target that was actually blurred out. They did not allow us to see what they hit in this one, but they did successfully hit it.
Probably Orb of Justice or something of that nature.
Man, it's that Is that new Machaba. But anyways, beyond that, though, it does appear the CENTCOM strikes have the proof and the receipts behind them to show that successful strikes have been conducted by U.S. forces, and we have been getting a large amount of eyewitness reports of the explosions, most likely from those very strikes that we just saw on film. At the moment, getting back to the IRGC statements, the IRGC is stating that they have conducted tremendous damage in their last wave of missile attacks against U.S. armed forces within the region. And while we can generally assume that the United States was not 100% successful in intercepting and shooting down the incoming drones and missiles, that report by the IRGC is heavily exaggerated. And I'm going to show y'all here really quickly of the confirmed damage that we can see on satellite. First, going to the Prince Hassan Air Base within Jordan, we were able to see that an MQ-4 Triton hangar does appear to have taken some moderate to severe damage to the structure, but it does not appear that the structure has been completely destroyed from the hit. This does confirm only one hit within the entirety of the Kingdom of Jordan that we can confirm by satellite photography at this point. We were also able to see that one hangar appears to have suffered some sort of a cratering or an impact on its southern side, most likely a grazing hit, given that in mind. At the Al Adid Air Base, we can actually find that one in particular if we go down to Al Adid. Al Adid is quite large, but it's not that large. We can probably easily find this one. And if we look here, we can see that there is... This actually appears to be the motor pool area, looking at that a second go around, and if we can find that particular part of the motor pool, which the motor pool is also unbelievably large as well, it was this building right here that appears to have taken a hit. And if y'all look at it really closely, you can see right here, there appears to be a crater on the southern side of the structure. From what we know, Iranian ballistic missiles are fired from the north, meaning that this missile almost largely missed the building entirely and most likely grazed the side of the roof right here on the wall of the south side of the building, and then exploded and cratered the ground directly outside of it, near to what appears to be some sort of a storage yard that sits outside of the larger building. We also were able to see that a storage facility for the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain was also hit as well. We can also see the geolocation there, done by none other than Phytux Network, an amazing friend of the channel. We get to talk to them occasionally from time to time, in times like these when we're trying to all corroborate the news and open source intelligence. And we also were able to see that a former UN base, this is actually the storage building at the Fifth Fleet headquarters, and this is the former UN base in Kuwait, which has been hit and is on fire. We actually have footage of that from Kuwait, not to get everyone confused here. This picture here is not from Fifth Fleet, this is actually from Kuwait, and we'll show you all the on-the-ground footage of that fire and strike a little bit later on. But those are the impacts that we can report and can confirm at the moment that the Iranians have been able to land, but notice that this list is far less inclusive than the lists that are issued by the IRGC, where they claim that they destroyed the Sun, an aircraft carrier, 10,000 U.S. soldiers, and a Diet Coke in a day. They're certainly not knocking out that kind of damage on each and every single attack. They're lucky, like I was saying prior, to even land a hit on one of the listed targets that they're talking about, and even then, it mostly appears to be grazing hits where they're almost missing the structure, or if they're able to hit it, it's almost a rare fluke. So right now, Iranian attacks are not proving to be successful, but there's a little bit of a caveat to this. Iranian attacks in a sustained conflict with the Iranians are going to start seeing greater chances and percentage levels of success as the conflict continues. Right now, Iran and the United States are playing a bit of an air defense game, at least the Iranians are with us here on the US side. We have a limited number of air defense interceptors and air defense systems within the entirety of the Middle East. We have several M104 Patriot interceptor batteries and about one operational THAAD in theater at the moment, along with the air defenses of the United States Air Force and Navy, which of course I have to mention. The Iranians are firing ballistic missiles and drones into this air defense perimeter, and we only have several hundred, possibly, MEM-104 missiles, probably a couple of dozen THAAD missiles, those aren't incredibly large numbers, and a decent amount of Fox 3, Fox 1, and, well, not really any Fox 2s anymore, those aren't really seen, but Fox 1 and Fox 3 missiles that can be used by the United States Air Force and the United States Air Arm of the Navy that can shoot down these incoming drones and missiles. But once those numbers start to run low, and we see that our munitions are not as voluminous as they are right now, the U.S. will have to start to prioritize what gets shot down and what is allowed through, meaning that in the next several several weeks, we could start to see, much like in the first phase of the war, that a larger amount of these missiles and drones are able to make it through the air defense perimeters and start hitting non-critical targets, which will most likely be the ones that will be allowed to pass on through. At the moment, while we're getting through that analysis and talking about these updates within the region, many people are talking about what is the best bet of what is going to be happening, well, what's going to be going on and how this is going to end, considering that this war is clearly escalating back into a full-blown conflict. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so as we're seeing the situation start spiraling back out of control, and it looks like there's really no end in sight, because once the threshold got crossed from the MOU falling apart, and now we're seeing the blow-for-blow strikes between the U.S. and Iran, we're kind of in a bit of a lock and step here. It's going to go the way it's going, and it's going to continue escalating until something's going to break eventually. So what is your best prediction of how the conflict is going to end as this progresses? About 33% said Iran will capitulate after defeat. 26% said Iran will go broke and quit, and 22% said Iran will force the United States forces out of the entire region via their threats and military force. And I would say this, I'm becoming very convinced that this war right here between the U.S. and Iran is not going to be won in any other way other than economically. That's going to be the main way that this war is won. So the U.S. has to start hitting things that are going to cripple Iran's economy and cripple their ability to fund the war and also to purchase more missiles from their partners around the world. That's the way it's going to be won. Invading Iran, that's too big of a bite to take off. That's simply too much for the U.S. to take on, a full invasion of Iran. That's not really realistic. Also trying to hit all the missile launchers and retake the Strait of Hormuz. Without some sort of ground operation in the Strait of Hormuz, that's going to be nearly impossible, in my opinion. So essentially, it's whoever goes broke first is gonna lose the war. So we need to make Iran go broke first. We need to make their economy go bust before the U.S. economy goes bust, because it is a bit of a race of time here. Because if the Iranians control the Strait of Hormuz and we can't get the oil out and we can't keep trade going, the clock is ticking for the United States at that point. So it's time is of the essence. They have to start hitting Iran hard, hitting that dual-use infrastructure, and going all the way in at this point very quickly. So I'm with the 26%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that the only way to see the conflict come to a resolution is to make the Iranians agree to our demands. There is no way to create a diplomatic resolution. We have already seen before the war that they were not willing to negotiate with the United States, and we're also seeing that in the interim period between the first part of the war and the second part of the war, which we're watching right now, they were still not willing to negotiate with the United States, meaning that we will have to force them into some sort of a capitulation or a surrender to some extent to be able to see that they agree to our demands. We may even be able to see in the process of that the Islamic regime is dismantled. However, with that in mind, there's two options of what we can do. The first option is a full ground invasion of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which, outside of the logistical and actual manpower difficulties involved in that, and finding the manpower to be able to not only invade Iran, but then hold the country down in an occupation for several years to reform a new government inside of Iran and stabilize the nation, it would be politically unpopular in the United States of America to conduct a land invasion of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and therefore would generally be avoided by any political leadership, including the current one in charge in the current administration. That means that we have to move on into the second plan, which is a war of attrition against the Islamic Republic of Iran, where we destroy their economic and war-making capabilities and see that they're brought to the negotiating table by those means. In that sort of a scenario, that means the United States of America has to be able to remove Iran's ability to conduct economic damage to us while we conduct major economic damage to them, while trying to avoid destruction of any sort of critical civilian infrastructure that could cause undue suffering. In that process, we would have to be able to destroy the port facilities, railway accesses, and any other money generators, particularly oil refineries and other oil infrastructure within the Islamic Republic of Iran, to be able to bring the country economically to its knees. Simultaneously, we also need to break the Iranian blockade within the Strait of Hormuz to stop them from having any kind of leverage against the United States of America to where they could conduct significant economic damage against us and our allies within a short amount of time. As we were able to see in the last wave of the war, when the Islamic Republic of Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz in a blockade, the United States of America largely was caught by surprise, as our war plan did not take that into consideration, although many writings in the U.S. military had already admitted for decades that that was going to be the first thing they did. Because we did not factor that into our war plan, the Iranians were able to shut the Strait of Hormuz, and as a result, the price per barrel of oil skyrocketed, and also the global economy started to slow down, particularly in the West, as a result. According to statements from the President of the United States in the interim period between the two conflicts, or the two phases of the war, the President did admit that that was the primary reason why we went into a ceasefire in an MOU with Iran, because otherwise the oil stocks in the United States most likely would have run out about this time right now at this point in the year. So we do understand that that is a significant threat that the Iranians can leverage against us, and while we are trying to wear the Iranians down economically and force them to agree to our demands, we also can't allow them the same privilege of doing that to us at a faster rate with the Strait of Hormuz. So we must break the blockade while simultaneously grinding Iran's economy to a nub and forcing them to surrender, because they will not have the means to continue the conflict.
Yeah, in my opinion, what the U.S. needs to do here is they need to issue a new ultimatum to Iran and tell them that, once again, they can either let the Strait of Hormuz be clear and free for ship traffic to go through the strait, so that way the ships can move freely and they can let go of their control of it, or in 48 hours, all their oil export capabilities are going to be destroyed, their oil refiners are going to get destroyed, and start literally just hitting them in an overwhelming strike. Just start doing that right off the bat. I think that's the best way to go about it, because the Iranians know that if their oil export capabilities get destroyed and their oil refineries and depots are getting hit, then they're largely out of luck when it comes to making money for the regime at that point. They can try to keep tolling the ships to the Strait of Hormuz to raise funds in the short term, but it's going to basically cripple the main driver of their economy. So, if they're willing to go that far, I mean, that's telling you a lot about where their mindset's at. They're basically going for broke at that point, because there's no hope in hell that the Iranian regime is going to survive much longer after that. So I think that's what they should probably do. That's an extreme step, but I think they should probably go for it.
I would say that generally we need to make sure that the response is as measured as possible, and we do not conduct any unnecessary actions. We only conduct the actions necessary to grind the Iranians down into a surrender, because we do not want to see that we start to radicalize the population in Iran in support of the government. Because we also have to consider, folks, that with economic hardships for the Iranian government will come economic hardships for the average Iranian. And that might put pressure on them to believe that the Islamic regime, which we know is unpopular to some extent, is driving them in this foolish conflict into economic ruin, not only at the national level, but at the individual level. And that could start to see that many people turn against the Iranian government internally, and that internal pressure could also be put on them to possibly end the conflict, so that way they can deal with the internal situation. If we start to conduct actions that could be considered unnecessary strategically and possibly increase civilian suffering that can be directly blamed on the United States, we could then see that the Iranians use that as a propaganda call to further radicalize and also polarize their population in support of the regime and a continuation of the conflict, meaning they could have almost an opposite effect of what we're looking for. Because while we want to end the conflict, we do not want to go overboard to the point that we start to galvanize the regime and also rally the population around them. We want the regime completely isolated in every way, and that means that we have to fight the war very wisely and only strike targets that are absolutely necessary to the goal of victory.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, the Iranians are already suffering to the extreme under this regime that's currently in charge in Iran. They just got done wiping 40,000 of their people out about 2 months ago. That's a huge thing they just did. Also, there's a water crisis that never got solved. Tehran is still under that water crisis that's been going on. Also, nonstop, food issues that's been taking place over the course of years. I mean, the life inside of Iran already sucks pretty badly under the current conditions. So I'm not really sure how much worse it can get, because the Iranian people are not ignorant to that unless they're extremists in the country, which there's certainly extremists, and there's also, people that just want to live their lives, free the regime. The people in Iran know that this regime is incompetent. They're running the Iranian country into the ground, and I think they know that the U.S. wouldn't be doing this to try to hurt the civilians. They would know that, and I think they would understand what it's all about. So, me personally, I say go for the big attacks. I say go for the oil refineries right off the bat and hit them strong and hit them hard in the very beginning, and give them an ultimatum. Like give Iran one more chance to back off before you go for that attempt, instead of just doing it out of the blue by saying 48 hours, open Strait of Hormuz or else, and go from there, would be my opinion.
I would have to say that I generally wouldn't give them an ultimatum at this point. I think we're kind of under the concept that they're not going to open the strait, and if they open the strait, it's not going to be in good faith. It's just going to be trying to buy themselves some time, and they might do that for a couple of days and then shut it down again anyways. I would say that we shouldn't issue them an ultimatum. While I'm also saying at the same time, we don't need to be shrinking any infrastructure that's unnecessary, only necessary infrastructure. At this point, we should be in the understanding that we're in a war to the finish, a knockdown, drag out fight. And there's no off ramps at this point for the Iranians. They've been given off ramps for the past several months, and they've taken absolutely none of them. So whatever follows, that's the risks that the Islamic regime undertook, and they will most likely see as a result of that the refineries are taken out, and there's not really a lot that they can do to stop it. I really wouldn't give
But
them any sort of ultimatums at this point. I would just let them see the consequences, and they can come to us and ask for mercy, but I wouldn't give them any chance at an off-ramp. They'll have to make their own.
it's for optics, though. I mean, you were mentioning this a moment ago, the whole optics of the thing. If you start hitting the refineries and all the oil infrastructure inside of Iran, then that could radicalize some people thinking that, oh, maybe the U.S. is doing this just to hurt the Iranian people. If you give them the ultimatum and then the Iranians hear about that as well, they'll be like, well, look, the U.S. is still trying to play fair. They're giving chances, even more chances, for the Iranian regime to do the right thing before they take this drastic step of destroying literally the main driver of the Iranian economy. So it looks like the U.S. is being very, very reasonable if they do that. And it doesn't hurt us to wait 48 hours. I mean, we probably have to wait 48 hours anyway before we launch an attack of that scale, because that takes preparation to be able to pull something like that off. So me personally, I would say Karg Island's on the menu, the petrochemical complexes are on the menu, the refineries and the depots, all those are on the menu at this point. And I think the U.S. might go for that anyway. I think that is their next step beyond what they're currently doing right now. They'll probably be going for Karg, I would imagine.
I would say I get the optics image, and and I'm the one advocating for that the most heavily. But at the same time, we've done about as much as we can in the optical sense, at least in that part of giving ultimatums and trying to give last chances, and this is the line, don't cross it in the sand, and then they keep crossing it. We've been doing that for months. We just did that to start this new round of conflict that we're seeing right now, where we said you announce the straits open in the next 24 hours or we go to war. And the Islamic regime didn't listen. And while optics would be good, I think that at this point, we shouldn't really be giving the Islamic regime, at least in that end of trying to improve and maintain optics for the United States, any sort of leverage. At this point, it should be clear, and we should make it clear as far as our messaging in Iran, the Islamic regime in its foolishness has taken us to the point that we have to conduct these actions to win the war. And so whatever actions that follow, we're definitely not going to be doing anything to cause civilian suffering, and we're only going to be targeting infrastructure or forces that are critical for the function of the regime. But everything that follows is war. We have given them so many off-ramps over the past few months, and they've taken none. And the only off-ramp they'll be able to have at this point is when the government itself asks for mercy or negotiations or a possible compromise, and we'll only negotiate those as the war continues. We will not be stopping the war to talk any further.
Maybe so. I would say this though. I see a lot of people in the chat. I just put up a poll about this, by the way. It looks like people have a lot of varying opinions about this. But, I think the U.S. is refraining from hitting Karg Island so far because the U.S. is hoping that in some weird world that we can make Iran into Venezuela. Because what we're doing in Venezuela is we've got the government there kind of in a semi-state of being on the U.S. side, and they're kind of not. They kind of hate the U.S., but they're also having to cooperate because they've been kind of forced to. And the U.S. is getting to exploit the oil inside of Venezuela. So that worked out good in that respect. The U.S. is trying to hope that they can do that with Iran too. It's not going to work here, though, in my opinion. We're not going to be able to get the oil out of Iran like we did with Venezuela. It's just simply not going to happen. So it's better to, take the situation very rapidly, finish their export capabilities. And Iran's very vulnerable too, because Karg Island is 90% of the export terminals is on Karg Island. So if the U.S. hits and bombards Karg Island tremendously, Iran's cooked. They can't export hardly anything at that point. They can only export 10% of their oil through various other means that are very, very small compared to what Karg was able to do. So I don't think the U.S. I think the U.S. is holding out false hope with that.
I think the U.S. is holding out false hope with an idea of creating an Iranian Venezuela. That's not going to be happening. The Venezuelan government, by the way, folks, just to explain the differences in a little bit of detail, the Venezuelan government is a socialist regime which was founded under Hugo Chavez in the earlier part of this century that we're living in. And since then, we have seen that the socialists have consolidated power into a one-party state within Venezuela and have largely been running the country as an authoritarian autocracy is the best way to explain it. The last leader, Nicolas Maduro of the regime was one who largely ran the country with an iron fist and took a very anti-American approach, aligning heavily with the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China to try and maintain his grip on power within the region, and also back up Venezuela with larger friends that may possibly come to their defense if they have the chance. Once we removed Nicolas Maduro, the regime that Hugo Chavez founded, the socialist one-party regime in Venezuela, is still in charge and operating under a new acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, which still is running the government in the very same form that Nicolas Maduro did, but at the same time, they are allowing U.S. oil companies to come in and develop or reacquire the components, assets, and also, I guess you could say, facilities that they were operating before they were seized by the government of Hugo Chavez. That is a very different sort of a governmental structure than the one inside the Islamic Republic of Iran. The one inside the Islamic Republic of Iran was forged largely in the fires of a revolution in 1979 that was purely anti-American in its original sentiments under Imam Khomeini. And since then, over the past 50 years, they have indoctrinated the population and their own government and have only been able to promote indoctrinated loyalists to the Islamic regime to its top levels, meaning that the resistance that exists inside of Iran is far stronger and far more permeable throughout the entirety of its institution than it is inside of Venezuela. There is no reluctance like there is in Venezuela, where they don't really like America, but to avoid further destruction, and also because of their isolation geographically, they're willing to kind of work with us a little bit. In Iran, they are willing to fight to the death, not because they have any friends that they can count on, but because they are that ideologically indoctrinated to where they are willing to take that step if they still have that chance. So there's really no way for us to try and make a situation like Venezuela out of Iran, because as long as the Islamic regime is in charge, they will still continue to see that ideologues and hardliners will continue to run the government and will continue to take a hostile approach to the United States no matter what. No compromise like that will be possible with Iran. So we generally need to be looking for an actual victory over the Islamic regime, not some sort of a compromise like we got with Venezuela. But it actually looks like a lot of people... Go ahead.
And also, it's interesting as well because Russia is no longer really in a position to supply Iran with anything. Russia is hanging on for dear life right now. They're in a much different position than 2 months ago. They're in a way worse position. Their whole economy is coming crashing down. So Russia really can't do much to help Iran anymore. They're largely having to let Iran go to a large degree. The only lifeline left for Iran is North Korea and China, mainly China, really. That's the main helper of Iran right now. And if China's not showing up to Iran's aid in a big enough way, then Iran's in deep trouble at that point. And especially if Karg Island's hit, I would say right now Iran's very vulnerable. And I'm not sure if the Iranians understand that or not, but if their oil export capabilities are wiped out and on Karg Island and they're destroyed, and also their refineries are hit and taken out, then Iran is a ticking clock at that point. Their whole country is a ticking clock, and there's really not much they can do to save it. So I'm not sure if Iran understands how their leverage is starting to wane off a little bit. They have the Strait of Hormuz, yes, that's a lot of leverage, but there's still levers the U.S. can pull to bring Iran to its knees. And I think they should start pulling those levers since Iran's blown up the MOU, and it was obviously a one-sided deal that favored Iran, and they even blew that deal up. So it's about time to take it the extra mile.
I would agree. I think it is about time to take it the extra mile. And in the meantime, it looks like a lot of people are talking about whether the U.S. should give Iran another ultimatum before destroying any of their oil industry and money-generating ports, industries, and other critical infrastructure in the country. And Matthew, what are people saying on that poll, and what are you also thinking about it as well?
Okay, so the question was, should the U.S. give Iran another ultimatum before absolutely wiping out the Iranian oil industry and their export capabilities? Only 19% said yes, give them another ultimatum, and 81% said no, no ultimatum. And I would stick to my guns. I would say, just for the optics of it, because we gotta wait probably 48 hours anyway to prepare a brand new round of major strikes. So I would say go ahead and give them the ultimatum now. Go ahead and issue that ultimatum, and then in 48 hours, when Iran obviously is going to reject it, go ahead and follow through with the attack anyway. They're obviously not going to accept it, I would imagine. So I say it doesn't hurt to give the ultimatum. It's good for optics. It looks good for the Iranians that might be on the verge of getting radicalized. It kind of keeps that at bay a little bit, and also it makes us look good in the international community. Like, we're not being completely unreasonable. We're giving them another chance, even though they don't deserve it. They're still getting another chance before they get hit very strongly. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would be with the 81%. I'm all for trying to make sure that the armed forces of our republic fight in a firm way, but a fair way, and make sure that there are no civilians that are caught in the line of fire that don't have to be there, and that we also do not cause any suffering to the innocents in Iran, of which there are many millions. But at the same time, the U.S. military must fight firmly and also fairly. And when we start to enter the concept that we are in an active war with the country, I believe that ultimatums largely are off the table. We are now entering into a warlike situation, and we will be making sure to fight the war as fairly and reasonably as possible, and we will fight it as nobly as we can. But at the same time, ultimatums are now long past. We have given many warnings and many chances to the Islamic Republic of Iran to make the right actions and avoid the situation that they are now in. But since they have decided to return back to the path of war with the United States of America, we will engage in the hostilities without any further warnings, and whatever comes upon the Islamic regime, they will largely be at the mercy of the U.S. Armed Forces. That's generally my approach to it. But I do have to say, folks, that there is always a good argument to be had to try and be overly reasonable and overly fair, because optics are incredibly important. And while many people would say that optics are not always important, I can tell you that optics won the Second World War about as heavily as the arms and shells of the armed forces of the Second World War won the conflict. When you look at Germany at the end of the war, folks, to give you all an example, and they saw the Soviets coming from the east and the Allies coming from the west, you know what many a German said? Let's go march west and surrender to the Americans instead of the Soviets. Because God forbid if we surrender to the Soviets, what's going to happen to us? Those optics do better to make people surrender, give up, and turn to our side better than endless brutality. And so I would say a very decent argument to give them another ultimatum, but once we enter a war, we should be in the mindset that there are no more ultimatums, and we will fight it firmly yet fairly. But outside of that, it appears that we have more breaking news coming out of this moment. So Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so it looks like the Russians are sending two aircraft en route to Iran right now. It looks like one special squadron aircraft and also one Russian Air Force aircraft is currently on its way down to Iran. At least that appears to be the flight path of these two aircraft. So it looks like they've taken off from Moscow, is where they came from. So Enforcer, I know Flight Radar 24 looks like it's having a glitch here for a minute, but there it goes. If you turn on the military toggle, you'll see both of those aircraft taking off. It appears to me like it could be possibly evacuation flights. That could be what these are, but they appear to be heading straight for Iran
I only see one of them, unfortunately. I'm sure the other one's there. Just the
toward
transponder's not more.
Moscow.
Huh?
It's toward Moscow.
It wasn't popping up a second ago. I looked up there and it wasn't there. So the both of them, it's probably evacuation of diplomatic personnel from Tehran, I would assume, because I think they did this the last time. We know that there's basically nobody down at Bushehr, and also the airport of Bushehr has been knocked out because it's already been cratered. So I would assume they're probably going to Tehran, or they might be going to a backup location and have told the personnel, the very little of them that were at the Bushehr nuclear power plant, to drive up to Shiraz, and they're going to go pick them up at Shiraz and then bring them back to Russia. So it's probably one of those two things.
Yeah, it could be. My guess was evacuation flights. I see some people say maybe they're delivering weapons. I don't think they do it that brazenly. Like, that's way too brazen. If Russia wants to send weapons, they can send it through the Caspian via ship. That's a lot more covert that way than sending aircraft. Because, like we can see here on Flight Radar 24, the U.S. government can definitely see it. So it becomes very obvious what Russia's doing. So we saw this last time, two exact aircraft of the same variety going to evacuate people, and that's probably what it's all about. But in the meantime, though, we do have some more breaking news right now that apparently during the U.S. airstrikes that just took place on Iran a short while ago, about 30 minutes to an hour ago, they apparently used a swarm of Lucas drones, which is a reverse engineered Iranian Shahed drone, against Iran tonight. That appears to be one of the first larger uses of the Lucas we've seen, and we need to see a lot more of that. We need this to get ramped up quite a lot. We need large swarms of Lucas to be used, basically fighting Iran's fire with fire by firing these drones and hitting stuff inside of Iran at a very cheap cost. So it's good to see that. It's promising, but they need to ramp up production quick because we need those in larger numbers.
I would definitely agree. And drones, as some of y'all may know, definitely a lot of y'all who have been around for the Ukraine war coverage, are a game changer in the war in Ukraine. And the Ukrainians have turned the situation around well into their favor with largely drones and drones alone in every single aspect of the conflict. So hopefully we'll be able to see that mass production of the Lucas drones and other drones of the strategic variety are continued en masse in the United States, and we're able to field these in the hundreds, if not thousands, a day, as that is largely the war-winning method in the 21st century in our current year. But we actually have more breaking news coming out as well right now. So, Matthew, what do we got?
So Bahrain's under another attack. They just came under attack right now. The sirens are going off and they're telling people to go to shelters. So Iran's launched even another salvo of drones and missiles at Bahrain. And once again, we've already seen the damage at Fifth Fleet headquarters. That's already been recorded on video. And it appears to be Bahrain's under an attack once again. So these are some very sustained attacks by Iran. I want to emphasize this, folks, because we got a lot of flack for it back in the day, about a month or two ago. The Iranian missile and drone capability was not decimated like the U.S. was claiming. And we were saying that, and we were getting a hell of a lot of flack for it back in the day about a month ago. And this proves us right. Now, we were saying that they had not destroyed all of it, and this is proof that Iran still has a hell of a lot of drones and missiles intact, and they're currently launching that huge stockpile in these consistent, nonstop attacks. So this is not a good sign that Iran's on the verge of collapse. They appear to be still, have a lot of fight in them. They have missiles, they have drones, and it's going to be going on for some time until the U.S. turns this around quickly. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that we did get it down on the nail, and if anyone would like to right now, you can now grovel at our feet for forgiveness. I'm just kidding, by the way, but it is something to note though that we were dead on the nail with that, because crazily enough, folks, what's funny about this channel is that while we are pro-American and pro-Western, that doesn't mean we fall into being idiots and not looking at things and assessing them with our very own eyes. And it was quite clear back then, assessing it with our very own eyes, that the achievements of the United States in the last round of the war was overly exaggerated to the extreme. And we're seeing that is once again true live on air. Also, to get y'all quickly an update from the IRGC, as they put out another update of what they've been able to do, which of course is extremely exaggerated. Fuel tanks, Patriot systems, and FPS systems were completely destroyed. We'd like to inform the honorable people of Iran that in the third phase of the retaliatory operation, in response to the aggressions of the arrogant and expansionist American regime, they always have to add a lot of flourish to our name, the valiant fighters of the IRGC's aerospace force completely destroyed the fuel tanks and Patriot air defense systems at the American Air Base in Ali Al Salim, Kuwait, as well as a strategic FPS radar system at the Ahmed Al Jabeira base. The retaliatory operation by your brave children continues. That's probably quite literal. I'm sure they're employing child soldiers in Iran. The Strait of Hormuz is our territory, and we will not allow a rogue and child-killing army from the other side of the world continue its illegal interference in it. So the Iranians are once again making extremely large claims that they've destroyed an entire Patriot system, which is highly unlikely. In the last phase of the conflict, not a single Patriot was knocked out on the U.S. side. There was a THAAD that was actually knocked out, unfortunately. Like an entire radar system for a THAAD was destroyed, which knocked out the whole battery, from what we understand. But this claim by the IRGC is flat out wrong. They're like, unless we get satellite or picture evidence to confirm this, I'm not believing hardly any of it. Maybe they hit the fuel tanks, that's believable, or maybe they grazed one of them and it did catch on fire, but a Patriot air defense system and an FPS radar system getting destroyed, highly unlikely. And also we have absolute proof by satellite or video or picture evidence to be able to confirm that those strikes were successful. Once again, they're claiming that they've hit everything, and they probably hit about nothing at this point from what we've been able to see from satellite. But moving us on out of that little bit of breaking news, we've also been able to get a great deal more news out of the Middle East. But before we move on to that, I do have to say, a huge thanks to everybody who has been watching so far tonight. We have had a peak viewership tonight of a whopping 24,500 people, and 114,000 people have watched the stream in the first hour and 10 minutes, of which I have to say a humongous thanks to everybody who has been watching so far tonight, and I hope that you all been finding our news coverage and our analysis to hopefully be top-notch as usual, hopefully. I'm trying to make sure to go overboard heavily tonight, folks, on analysis, and I hope that y'all are enjoying that, because usually in these sorts of breaking news streams, a lot of people are trying to look for some form of an answer, and we're trying our best to give some answers to the situations we're watching right now and how they're transpiring, what their aims are, and what might be the developments and aspirations of our forces here within the next coming weeks. But in the meantime, before we get on into the rest of our news in the Middle East and our news from Ukraine, which I cannot understate is as big as the news coming from the Middle East today, I do have to say that the fundraiser tonight is doing absolutely unbelievable. In the course of the first hour and 10 minutes, it has raised $1,744 of its $2,000 goal, meaning that we are only about $250 away from the fundraiser goal as we are right now. And I gotta say, a humongous thanks to everybody, once again, who's been supporting this fundraiser tonight, as it is not for any situation within the Middle East, it's actually for Razum for Ukraine, which is an incredible nonprofit which helps out the innocent civilians of Ukraine, which have been suffering greatly at the hands of the Russian Federation's brutal attacks on the citizenry security within their country. And I got to say that it's absolutely incredible and amazing to know that so many people have gone out of their way once again tonight to get the fundraiser so close to the fundraiser goal, and hopefully well beyond it here very soon. But before we get to naming out some of those top donors here at this point of the stream, we actually have more breaking news that's coming out of the Middle East right now. So what do we got?
Okay, so this is on the economic front because a lot of people will note that now that the war has gotten out of control again, the U.S. was on the brink of a disaster economically. We were on the brink of it right before this MOU talk started taking place. We're now seeing the two warning signs that the economic situation is about to get bad are coming back yet again. South Korea's stock market's diving. It's dove about almost 5%, a little bit over 5% with the current trading right now. So that was the warning sign we saw last time that it started getting bad economically. That warning sign has returned. Also, WTI crude oil is now up about 4.2%, which was expected because obviously the oil price dropped quite significantly since the MOU and the ceasefire was put into place. Now we're seeing it's rising once again. So now it's up to about $75 a barrel or so, and I would expect that to go probably a lot higher once again if this war keeps up like this. So once, like I said earlier, the clock is ticking again. Either Iran or the United States are going to go broke first. We need to make Iran go broke first, not us, because once again, there is a clock on this. We can't take our sweet time with it. We kind of got to get busy. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would completely agree. We definitely do need to get busy, and it does appear that the economic damage, especially in South Korea, which is very reactive to this for some reason, is already beginning to plummet by 400 points within the last 30 minutes. That's no joke. 500 points in 30 minutes. They started off the day at 7.5 thousand points. They're now down to 7,075. So that's not very good. And we'll probably see the breakers trip inside of the stock market and stop trading in South Korea. So hopefully we'll be able to see that we can conduct these actions swiftly, or we can stabilize the situation where Iran cannot conduct economic damage on us and our allies here in the very near future. But we just hit the goal!
Hey, let's go!
Damn, I got the miners on.
It's very hot out here in Salt Lake City, but the fundraiser is even hotter.
Matthew's running out of the mine, running out of the mine shaft into the open air, going, gold, gold. We're like, man, he struck gold. Next thing you know, Matt's millionaire. But beyond that, I got to say, humongous congrats to everybody, all of the amazing folks of the Lee Spring Army who have supported this fundraiser once again this Sunday and have raised another whopping $2,029 at this point right now in support of none other than Razum for Ukraine. Y'all's support is absolutely incredible and is helping to save lives and help out the folks in Ukraine who definitely need the help a great deal. The war is still ongoing, and many people will know that the civilians still suffer greatly from the Russian attacks that are conducted nightly, and that's the kind of support that helps out the amazing folks in Ukraine to be able to keep the good fight going, and for the Ukrainian armed forces to focus their attention away from the humanitarian side of things and on into fighting and hopefully ending the war as quickly as possible. So humongous thanks to everybody who's been helping out on this fundraiser tonight, and if you would like to continue to donate to it, you still can. We may have hit the goal, but you can still throw in a donation to the fundraiser if you would like to and get it well above the $2,000 goal. But before we move on into the rest of our news in the Middle East, I do want to take a brief moment to list off our top donors that we've been able to see through the fundraiser so far to this fundraiser. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so to list off our top donors so far tonight, we have had a 160 from James Hughes, and a huge shout out to James for that biggest donation of the night. We also had a 120 from Tom S. Also a 100 from Hal Rose and LWK55. Also 100 from Utterly Bumpty, as well as a 75 from Old Warrior Fella, a 50 from Richie, and a 50 from Trister1, and including a 50 from Dave. And a huge shout out to all those top donors so far. And also not just the top donors, but everybody that's donated once again tonight, because it is a fantastic fundraiser, Razum for Ukraine, to help all those Ukrainians once again, because we're about to get to the Ukraine-Russia news here in just a second, and that news is as crazy and as exciting as what's going on in Iran right now, and it's probably even crazier, depending on who you ask. The stuff happening in Crimea right now and in the Sea of Azov is absolutely unbelievable, what's been taking place today, and honestly, that's going to be some news I can't wait to get to. But Enforcer, what say you?
Oh, it's absolutely incredible news, folks. I really cannot wait. I'm chomping at the bits to get to the Ukraine war news. It's really something. But in the meantime, I got to give a humongous thanks and a shout out to all of the top donors and all of the donors who threw in donations that were too small that we could not name, because each and every single one of y'all have made this fundraiser possible tonight. If it wasn't for all the folks throwing in a couple of bucks and all the folks throwing in hundreds of bucks, this fundraiser wouldn't have been able to make it to where it is right now. The top donors usually make up 50% of the amount of funds that are raised for the fundraisers every single Sunday, and everyone who throws in less than 50 makes up the other 50%. And so we are absolutely appreciative and thankful to all of y'all who are supporting this fundraiser, as y'all are continuing to make big differences in the areas of the world that we cover the news on every single day. So humongous thanks to all of y'all so much once again. And before we get on into the rest of that news, we're going to take a brief second to take 3 questions from the chat, and then we're going to be getting the rest of the news for the night. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right. So also, by the way, if you throw in a super chat tonight, we will get those during our last question segment. So that way we can rabbit hole those a little bit more. But in the meantime, though, to get 3 live chat questions to see what the audience is saying, we do have a question here from Dapper. He said, could we finally start seeing the U.S. military get serious on Iran?
I say yes. With the strikes that we're seeing right now, it looks like they're focusing more on a campaign to deprive the Iranian regime of its capability to function, more so than we're seeing it trying to hit the regime itself directly, which is always going to end up being unsuccessful. And I hate to say it this way, folks, but the reality of it is that in an actual war, taking out the head honcho doesn't really do anything. That guy is actually replaceable. That's kind of the unfortunate reality of it. When Stalin died, there was a guy to replace him. Largely within months, there was a power struggle that ensued. When Hitler died, there was a guy to replace him. Whenever the president has died in history, there's the vice president that replaces the president. Everybody in a governmental institution is largely replaceable. What is not replaceable, however, is the apparatus that keeps that government running, the money that flows through it, and where that money comes from. And those things are a lot easier to destroy and knock out and bring this regime in Iran to its knees that way than it is to try and strike the people directly operating the regime and bring them to their knees in that form. So I hope that addresses that well, at least the best I can, because I think with how we're seeing these going this time, and the fact that they haven't gone out of their way to try and take out top officials, and they're going after the support institutions that keep the regime afloat, it seems to me like they're fighting the war a lot more seriously this time around. I hope, however, that we start to hear of much more significant operations within the Strait of Hormuz, because we've heard of a lot of actions that are being conducted against the coast, but we need to see that that is the focal point of all operations that are being conducted right now. If we do not see that that is the case, probably by tomorrow, we're going to probably be making the same failing we made the first time around a second go around. But I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next question.
All right, so our second question here of the 3 is going to go to none other than Drowsy. He said, do you think Iran will now attack water and oil facilities and others in the Gulf states in retaliation to these new strikes?
It's possible that they could. They actually conducted those strikes the last time, if we're being entirely honest. During the first phase of the war, even when we were not hitting those sorts of sites inside of Iran actually started to hit desalination plants inside of Kuwait, and I believe one of them inside of Bahrain. They also hit a couple of power plants as well in some of those countries, mostly thermal power plants that were operating along their coastlines. So generally, the answer to that's yes. If this war keeps going, they will eventually start to hit those sorts of sites, whether we're hitting them inside of Iran or not, which generally I would say that, in my honest opinion, we shouldn't really be going for those inside of Iran. We should be going and using our munitions on targets that actually impact the war in a way where we win it. Hitting a power plant or a desalination plant doesn't really do anything for us in winning the war. It just makes the Iranian civilians suffer and also gives the Iranians a propaganda point to go, the U.S. blew up your drinking water supply. That's why you ought to support us, because we're the good guys in this whole thing. We're protecting y'all from these people. So generally, that would be my stance on what should happen if the Iranians, say, start hitting desalination plants and power plants inside of Kuwait. The real thing that we should do in that situation is just try and make sure that they are well enough defended that those attacks are not successful. So to make sure that they have drone defenses, in short, that do not require a Patriot interceptor missile that's $1 million a pop, and there's probably only a couple of hundred of in the Middle East right now, to be fired at every single drone that only costs tens of thousands of dollars, and the Iranians are producing hundreds of them a month, or thousands of them a month. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And a great question there, Drowsy. And with that, we're on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news.
All right, so our last one of the segment is going to go to none other than AF Kaplan. He said, if things start getting desperate for Iran, do you think China or another third-party state will come to their rescue?
They would like to, but there really is no way for them to physically do that, luckily enough for us. The People's Republic of China does not have the expeditionary capabilities within their navy or the entirety of the People's Liberation Army to be able to actually support the Islamic Republic of Iran in any meaningful way. They could try and threaten conflict against the Republic of China on the island of Taiwan, but that would most likely not be a wise action for China. From what we understand, they are still not militarily ready to actually invade Taiwan, and so they could try and kick off that war prematurely and then suffer a defeat and not really be able to return back to that conflict anytime soon because of their hastiness in trying to make a threat that would get the US to back off of Iran. Additionally, Russia certainly does not have the expeditionary capabilities to help out Iran in any real way. And that's the important thing. A country can openly threaten that we don't like what the US is doing and you want to stop that. But unless if they have any way to really go down there and get into a confrontation with us in the Middle East, they really don't have any way to stop us. All they can really do is lodge diplomatic complaints from afar and just watch as the Iranians get mauled, in short. So the answer to your question is, if they had the ability, they definitely try and intervene and stop us. But in reality, neither of them have the expeditionary capabilities or the support and sustainment capabilities to even conduct a conflict against us in the Middle East in support of Iran, so they really can't do anything to help Iran. And that's also why we saw that neither of them really came to Iran's aid the first time around either, is because they really don't have the ability to. So I hope that does address the question. Well, great question, by the way. A lot of people asked that one, and it's a really interesting answer. But moving us on from that, it is now time for us to get on out of this question segment and on into the rest of the news for the night. I'm going to be annotating a little bit of the posts and markers that we have within the Middle East, as we do have a lot of news in the Ukraine, and some of these, a lot of these posts within the Middle East are just eyewitness reports of explosions within particular areas. So I'll just summarize a couple of them as we go. But moving us on down into the Strait of Hormuz, where we've heard the most important developments of the day, we were able to hear that CENTCOM today did claim that the Strait of Hormuz is open. According to U.S. Central Command, the Strait of Hormuz is open to all vessels seeking to lawfully transit the international waterway. U.S. forces are positioned and prepared to ensure that freedom of navigation remains available despite unwarranted Iranian aggression, harassment threats, and arbitrary declarations. Iran does not control the strait. Traffic is flowing, which was put in bold by CENTCOM.
Yeah, some more of that classic bullshit from CENTCOM, it appears like. Then why were we giving Iran an ultimatum to declare the Strait of Hormuz open and free for ship traffic if the damn thing was already in control of the United States? What are we doing?
I don't even know. On the other hand, the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, which is the Iranian puppet authority that was made to control the strait, issued the following today. Transiting the Strait of Hormuz is currently not possible. When the strait eventually reopens, the only way to obtain valid permits is through the Persian Gulf Strait Authority. So the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, which is an Iranian puppet authority, has stated that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. And now we enter into the biggest cluster F that I have to explain, which is ships are not going through the strait. If you're hearing otherwise, it's a crock of shit. And I cannot put that in any other way because my distaste for even having to talk about this is quite grand. But in the video I made today, I mentioned that there were no transits going through the Strait of Hormuz, and that many people wanted to tell me I was wrong because the merchant ships had found out a simple hack. If they turn off their AIS transponder, the Iranians can't shoot them. Which sounds amazing on paper, but the problem is that that's not true. The Iranians have something on the coastline, along the whole region, called a surface search radar. Surface search radars are special in the fact that they are designed to be able to emit a radar pulse over the surface of a body of water, and anything that sticks up above that body of water comes back as a radar pulse, which is detected by the radar system and then computed to pick up the size and also the height of the vessel to be able to triangulate what exact kind of vessel it is. Merchant ships, which usually are about 1,000 feet long these days and about 150 feet tall, give pretty big radar pulses back to the surface search radars, meaning that the Iranians know, quite literally, as soon as the big-ass, fat-ass merchant ship enters the strait at 8 knots, they know where it is the entire time. Turning off its transponder is not a NordVPN hack or something along those lines where you just slap the VPN on and you appear like you're in Switzerland or something. That doesn't work in real life. Surface search radars completely moot that. And that's why the Iranians, in many a prior time, fire at the ships that go into the strait and hit them. Much like yesterday. There were ships inside the strait that did not have their transponders on. The Iranians still blew their ass up because they have surface search radars that are still operational. So if people are saying out there, and I have to say this because a lot of people want to say, well, other people are saying, I hate to tell you all this, and I don't mean to be rude to those other people, no disrespect to them, but I don't really give a damn what other people are saying. Other people are wrong. We have looked at this before during the first phase of the war when the president was claiming that dozens of ships were going through the strait every single day with their transponders off. We never saw a single one turn their transponder on that was in the Persian Gulf and made it to the Gulf of Oman or vice versa. The ones that were in the Persian Gulf were stuck there for months, and the ones that were in the Gulf of Oman were also stuck there for months. There were no passages. Right now, commercial ships aren't willing to make the passage because the U.S. Navy isn't even in the strait. And there's also now a question as to whether or not the IRGC laid mines in the Omani shipping lane, which the IRGC announced that they did just about a day ago. So there really is no way to get through the strait that we know of that might be safe at this point. Rather than the Iranian shipping channel, turning off the AIS transponder doesn't do anything at all to conceal the ship from the Iranians, and the Iranians can completely see the vessel and can still fire at it, as we do know from yesterday and today. If you don't believe me, another UK MTO report came out today that confirmed that the IRGC had fired at more vessels. And according to
Let me give you the numbers real quick, by the way, because people will be like, oh. Here's the numbers. So over the last 24 hours, only 20 commercial vessels have transited through the Strait of Hormuz in coordination with the U.S. military, in addition to several vessels that transited without U.S. coordination, according to U.S. officials, and that's being reported by Barack Ravid on Twitter. Meanwhile, what's normal is about 140 ships a day. But when the Strait of Hormuz was open before the war started kicking off and Iran took control of the strait, there was 140 ships going through there. There's now only 20, and that's possibly a good day right there. So obviously the U.S. doesn't have control of it. Otherwise, 140 ships would be passing through on the daily. And that's not the case.
Also, I saw someone say, and this is actually a good point, good counter. Hachioda said the surface radars have been destroyed, the surface search ones. The stationary surface search radars have been destroyed. The Iranians have mobile surface search radars. Modern weapon systems that are based on truck chassis are usually made to all be mobile, every single part of them. So a lot of the anti-ship missiles that are fired are most likely having their vectors given to them for the missiles by a truck that's carrying a surface search radar on it. So while the stationary systems were destroyed, and that is true, the mobile surface search radars, which we still understand are operational, as we haven't really seen a large number of them get destroyed, are still out there and operational. So when that anti-ship battery comes out of wherever it's in hiding or comes back to the coastline, they all drive out into a certain field. They all are able to communicate with each other with radio. The one truck with the radar stops, turns on the surface search radar, and they immediately get pings out there in the strait if anyone's there. And then they're able to figure out what pings are the ones they want to hit. So they're looking for merchant ships, and then they vector in the fire of their anti-ship missiles, their drones, their surface boats onto wherever that radar ping is at that they're triangulating and vectoring fire onto. So that's kind of caveat. Good point though, Hachioda. I didn't clarify that earlier that they have mobile surface search radars, but they do, and that's kind of still the issue. Is that yes, we did knock out the stationary ones, but they still have the mobile surface search. So moving us on out of that bit of news that has come out of the strait, we also were able to hear as well from the Iranian side that the Iranians claimed earlier in the day, and I do not believe that this is true, that they were firing at U.S. warships that were operating in the strait. We have no inclination of any Arleigh Burke-class destroyers or any LCSs that were operating in the strait today. There was no confirmation of that from the U.S. side, and the Iranian side didn't really give a lot of details. Usually whenever they issued reports like this in the first wave of the war, they were usually completely false. So while the Iranians reported this report is worth less than the electricity it took to put this on Twitter. But moving us on out of that, we have also been able to move into the areas of the Khuzestan province, which has come under significant attacks today. Two different air bases, one within Ahmadiyya and also one within Dezful, were hit today. We don't really have any pictures of that. We just have the eyewitness reports confirming hits on those airfields, and we've also been able to hear that some of the infrastructure, critical infrastructure for operations within the Khuzestan province has also been hit and knocked out as well. Inside of Kuwait, we were able to confirm that an Iranian impact did hit that UN mission within Kuwait earlier in the day, but largely it's not really used anymore, meaning that attack was largely for naught. Also, once again, notice how the Iranians are attacking UN facilities, which have absolutely no involvement in conducting the war on the part of the United States. We also got a video of the U.S. firing ATACMS missiles, most likely from M142 HIMARS, from Camp Buring within the northern area of Kuwait, which was filmed here by a Kuwaiti.
Also, by the way, while we're watching this footage right here, the Russian Special Squadron aircraft appears to be vectoring possibly possibly toward Turkmenistan. It looks like. So it appears they're trying to snake their way into Iran. It looks like.
Well, that's interesting. They might be going to Mashhad off in the east, like the northeast. They might have had people there for the funeral that weren't able to leave yet, so they're sending the special squadron down because that's where the burial plot was for a little bastard that got buried. It was up there in Mashhad, so they might actually be flying into Mashhad to go pick up the people that are left there. Man, wouldn't that be funny if Medvedev is still there and they got to pick him up and fly him back out?
Yeah. Speaking of which, let's see here. Has he posted? Let's see here. Dmitry Medvedev. Let's see if he's been posting anything. I might give us a clue here. Let's see. There he is right there. Let's see here. Has he been posting? So the last thing, so he hasn't posted. He hasn't posted since then. So he hasn't put anything on Twitter since he showed up in Iran. And in fact, the last post that he put out there was on July 3rd about the funeral, and he's gone completely silent after that. So he might be actually stuck there.
Oh boy, that's what they're going down for. They're going down to pick his ass up, probably in Mashhad. Oh man, that's great. That's incredible. Oh man, I wish we could get a live feed of what his expressions look like right now, because he talks a lot about nuclear conflict with America and the West. I wonder what he thinks of the conventional arms of the Republic now that he gets to watch them basically all around him right now. Wonder how he feels.
Yeah, I wonder. I'm not really sure, but yeah, you might be stuck there because that's kind of unusual. He hadn't really put anything out since then. It's been like radio silence.
Man, tragedy. Real tragedy for them. We'll have to see if that's where they land, but if they land there, I'm putting money on it. They're trying to get him and a couple of other people that went from Russia to the funeral out of Iran. But moving us on out of that whole deal, we've also been able to see that Bahrain has come under several attacks over the course of the day, and we also got eyewitness reports of explosions in Amman, Jordan. We also were able to hear that the siren sounded in Muafak earlier in one of the prior waves of strikes, but those strikes are still ongoing right now. So, now with our larger recap of the Middle East, I also have to give you all the last bit of information before we move on that the Islamic Republic of Pakistan and also the Kingdom of Qatar are still calling on all parties to to exercise restraint, take steps to de-escalate, and fulfill their commitments under the Memorandum of Understanding. This doesn't really mean anything. This is usually the statements from a third-party diplomatic negotiator when things fail. They're just trying their best to make it not fail, as that is their duty, but it has already failed. These statements are largely for naught and really have no impact on the larger situation. But moving us on out of all of this, it's now time for us to move on up and into Ukraine. But before we move on into that, I want to bring y'all to Washington, D.C. really quickly, because as many of y'all will know, the shocking news came out last night while we were on air within our last minutes that the now deceased Senator Lindsey Graham had passed away from a sudden heart attack after returning from Ukraine only hours ago when he suffered the heart attack and died at his home in Washington, D.C. So many people have made many statements, both good, the bad, and the quite ugly, largely the quite rude, about the passing of the senator. But I would like to add something before we get on into the Ukraine war that was made as one of the final press releases by the senator's office before he passed away, just hours before he would pass that night, yesterday on the 10th of July. Graham, Blumenthal, Shaheen, Wicker announced agreement with the current administration on legislation holding purchasers of Russian oil and natural gas accountable. U.S. Senators Richard Blumenthal, Lindsey Graham, John Shaheen, and Roger Wicker released the following statement today. This was only hours before his passing. We are proud to announce that we have reached an agreement with the current administration to move our updated Russia sanctions legislation forward. We are very pleased with the significant progress and expect to roll out the legislation very soon. As Russia intensifies its slaughter of civilians, it is imperative that the legislative and executive branches work together to create tools to exact a heavy price on those who buy Russian oil and natural gas, fueling the Putin war regime. And that was largely the very last act of the senator before he passed away, which was attempting to work on passing this bill to support Ukraine and implement even further crippling sanctions against the Russian Federation for its ongoing war against Ukraine. And so I do want to make sure to remind people that while we do not take a political stance here on the channel, and we do not pick any favorites on the left or the right, I would have to remind y'all that senators and representatives who pass are dead, and so making jabs at them really don't do anything for anyone. It's not like they're running for re-election, and it's also not like they're around anymore, and so it's largely just respectable, no matter the person, to give their respects considering that they were an American elected representative. Not only that, we should also remember that while a lot of people may have different opinions about Lindsey Graham as a U.S. Senator and his tenure, he was a very avid supporter of the armed forces in the state of Ukraine, and making sure that the Ukrainians were given the best foot forward by this republic to see that they could see the victory and liberty that the United States was able to achieve through our long and bloody conflict with the British in the American Revolution. And so I would have to say it's very unfortunate to hear of his passing, especially in that regard in foreign policy. And I would have to say that my condolences are with his family in this trying time after such a brief and sudden passing, which I believe took many by shock yesterday when it was announced late at night.
Yeah. Also, by the way, I mentioned last night it looks suspicious that he died so suddenly and quickly. I think the family or the spokespeople came out today and said that he died from an aorta rupture. Apparently, it was something that was coming on over some time. So it was not a poisoning. The toxicology report hasn't come out yet from the autopsy, but it does not appear to be a poisoning because the aorta rupturing, that's not what Novichok causes. That's not what VX causes either. That's something completely different. So it appears like he actually did just die from natural causes, just a very sudden death. And when it's that sudden, it's really hard to get your mind around it when it happens that fast. So, but unfortunately, it was what it was.
Yeah, very unfortunate. And, like, of course, in our modern day, especially considering that he had just come back from a very important meeting in Ukraine with Zelensky and the Ukrainian government, many people would believe it was foul play on the part of the Russians. But unfortunately, it just happened to be that he suffered a very tremendous medical incident and truly did die of natural causes. In a very pivotal moment, apparently, also quite ironically, according to, I believe it was an aide that spoke about his passing just hours before he died when he returned back from Ukraine, he joked that he couldn't die now because he has so many things going on in foreign policy have to be tended to, and then he died quite literally just hours later. So a very ironic sort of a statement considering what we know now. He did pass on right afterwards, and he was mentioning that they need to move on with this bill in the Congress to make sure that these sanctions were passed against the Russians, that the war in Iran is brought to a successful resolution, and also that further developments in the Middle East of trying to solidify the U.S. security assurance sphere in the region were completed. Those were some of his objectives, at least according to the aide that spoke to the press today about some of the last words they heard from the senator, and then he passed away not long after. Very
Yeah.
unfortunate to hear.
Also, by the way, I see some people saying, it could have still been a poisoning. But the catch is, though, folks, an aorta rupturing, there's no like type of poison or any type of like chemical out there that would cause your aorta to rupture. That it doesn't exist. I've actually done a lot of research in the past, like on Russian methods that they use to poison people. This is not consistent with any of that. So the toxicology report will come out. I would be surprised if they saw anything in that report. It's probably going to be very mundane. It's probably going to show nothing. And he was 71 years old, so he wasn't a spry young man or anything like that. So it sounds to me like it was just simply old age, natural causes, and that's what it was. There's no like sneaky like conspiracy theory here. It appears to be exactly what it was.
Yeah, I would say, and also, folks, like, we always like to believe that there's more going on than meets the eye, but sometimes it just is what it is. People sometimes just up and die, even if they are elected officials. Sometimes they quite literally just die in their sleep. I mean, there's many U.S. presidents who've done that. FDR died of high blood pressure and a massive heart attack as a result. Also, let's see, Warren G. Harding died in his sleep as well in the midst of his tenure as president, just to mention a couple of the presidents who have died of natural causes in their own tenure, and many senators and representatives do as well. Just very unfortunate that it happened right after he came back from Ukraine and was working on major developments with passing sanctions bills against the Russian Federation here in the Congress, but it is what it is, I suppose. Life has its own ways. But moving us on out of that news within Washington, D.C., we've also been able to hear of major developments moving us directly on into the war in Ukraine. The armed forces of Ukraine have been conducting a unbelievable and never before seen in the course of history drone attack campaign against the Russian Federation. And the impacts and the damage that has been caused to the Russian Federation, and especially the occupied territories at this point, is dire. Many of y'all will notice that a lot of the markers within the Russian Federation are beginning to thin out on the day-to-day. And a lot of y'all are wondering, where in the world are those gas shortage queue videos of people waiting in line for gas, showing how many people and how bad off the fuel supply situation is and how many people do not have any? I would love to say that we had plenty of them, and we do. The problem is that we can't show any of them on air. And to recap what I saw today, I saw one guy getting beat up by a gang of dudes at the gas station with baseball bats. I saw another guy get hit with a crowbar. One man was shot, and a couple of more were just beat up with fists. I can't show any of those on air. So take my word for it. I hate to do the trust me bro on this one, but there were a lot of clips that came out today of fuel shortages and the lines and the civil unrest that's now gripping Russia from the fuel insecurities. But I can't show any of those on air because of YouTube's terms of service. So if you want to find them, we have, I think, a few of them on the Twitter page. So if you want, you can click on the link in the description below and go to our Twitter page and watch them. And some of those, we also try and keep them tame. I think we have one where one guy got hit by a crowbar and a couple by bats. But the one where I saw that a guy actually got shot, we can't even put that on our Twitter page because in the midst of being on air, we could scroll over that and YouTube would have an issue with it. But moving us on out of that description of why we don't have any of those videos, because it's become so violent in that regard, it's time for us to move on down into something that we can cover that we do have written proof of, which is the situation inside of Crimea. Crimea has become a living hell on earth. We don't even have to take that at face value of propagandizing and sensationalizing. That is the fact of life inside of Ukraine today. Truck passages via the M14 highway in the south of Ukraine from Melitopol to Crimea are almost non-existent, even with the pontoon bridge still standing at the Chandhar Gap. There are absolutely no supply trucks crossing over the Kerch Bridge or railway cargo to speak of that enters Crimea at this point. The last saving grace of Crimea, which were the ships that were passing out of the Russian Don River from Rostov-on-Don and down the Sea of Azov to Kerch, have taken so many losses that Russian authorities have announced the complete closure of that shipping corridor to Crimea to try and conserve their ships and stop them from being heavily damaged and knocked out of action for months, if not years, to be able to effect repairs on all of these stricken vessels. The situation is so bad that reports have now come out that entire cities in northern Crimea, particularly the city of Dzhankoy, are now screaming from the rooftops as loud as they can that the Russian government must help them because the situation is so bad it is now an unmitigated disaster. And lawlessness now descended on the streets today, according to some of these reports, as people try and survive in the abject conditions. Here is one of the statements from a vlogger typical Dzhankoy, which is apparently a blogger based out of the city of Dzhankoy. Dear Sergei Valerovich, who is the governor of Crimea, the occupational governor of Crimea, please explain why, in the current emergency, there's no support for the population with generators and fuel. People remember the blackout, the scheduled outages, and the aid that came from the mainland. Today, many feel a complete sense of hopelessness. Gasoline and diesel prices are skyrocketing. Where's the regulatory oversight? Why can't people fill their generators with gasoline? What should pensioners, people with disabilities, and families with small children do? Small businesses are closing one after another. Stores, coffee shops, salons, bakeries, and other businesses are suffering huge losses. Many people have already lost their jobs. Meanwhile, taxes, rent, wages, and utility bills have not been waived. People are losing income, but their obligations remain. Thousands of families have lost food, unable to cook properly, charge their phones, or provide their children with basic necessities. Tensions are rising. People are becoming embittered, and reports of theft are surfacing. This is no longer just a household inconvenience, it's a serious social problem. Let's call a spade a spade. This is an emergency of enormous proportions. If a region needs assistance, it needs to ask for it. Our country is large and has always come to the aid of its regions in difficult times. And another post stated the following, which was even more grave sounding. We ask that what is happening in northern Crimea be made public. For a week, we have not had power turned on for even an hour. People are throwing out food, losing their jobs, and their lives. There's not even water in some areas, and in some parts of the city, the power is only on for 4 hours a day. There are rumors that our lights are turned on for several hours a day. This is not true. We're completely without power. City and district authorities do not deliver water to populated areas where there is no water supply at all. Elderly people have no way to stay in touch with loved ones or travel to a place where they can charge their phones in an emergency. There's one emergency center in Dzhankoy where you can charge your mobile device. We wrote appeals directly to Sergei Valerovich Askinov, after which the city administration called to reassure us everything will be better by mid-August. They said over the phone after the complaints, how can we survive under these conditions? Not everyone has the opportunity to leave and wait this situation out. We, the steadfast people of northern Crimea, ask for help. If anyone doesn't mind, please share this. And so letters are now being issued directly from the city of Dzhankoy, which are painting a scene of absolute lawlessness, abject poverty, and an absolute local economic collapse that's now affecting everybody who's left in the city. People are apparently breaking into any buildings that are left that have any supplies in them and are looting them. People are apparently attacking each other in the streets for whatever may be left. People are losing their jobs left and right. This sounds like it is the apocalypse at this point in northern Crimea, and yet the Russian government's response is largely the same Soviet canned response that we've seen many a times. Do not fret, citizen. It is not as bad as you're saying. You're overreacting and you're acting irrational. The situation will be resolved in only a short amount of time. You just have to be able to have that Soviet stiff upper lip and get through the matter at hand, and it will be much better in the short while ahead. And that is not happening. The situation is only getting worse in these regions, and yet Russia is unseen at this point fixing any of it. We don't even see the Russian government acting out, at least for now, on their larger evacuation plans that we had already gotten leaked to us were being planned in the background at the very upper levels of the Russian government. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this situation right now, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so right now we're seeing that the distress calls, literally distress calls, are going out from Crimean citizens that are left there, abandoned by Vladimir Putin, and they're exposing a complete civil collapse that's even worse than what was previously reported. And I've been wondering how bad it was getting, and now we're getting our first indications that's getting so bad it's turning into Mad Max down there. It's turning into like the Hunger Games inside of Crimea. No joke intended whatsoever. 62% said Putin is going to leave them to die inside of Crimea. He doesn't give a damn. While 19% said Crimea will turn on Putin soon, and 12% said limited help will arrive soon. So y'all might remember, we had a debate about this a while back. I was adamant that Vladimir Putin was going to let these people die a slow death inside of Crimea. And I turned out to be correct. He is not evacuating the people. They're currently basically dying a slow death as we speak, and it's turning into an absolute tragedy inside of Crimea. It's turning into a crisis of magnitudes I'm not sure people have seen in the modern era. So I'm with the 62%. I think Putin's going to lead them down there, and as the situation worsens and gets worse and worse and worse, and the Russians are unable to help, Crimea is going to turn into a lawless land of hell. That's what it's going to turn into. It's isolated, it's cut off, and the people down there are going to start going absolutely berserk. So on this one, you can put one coin into the Enforcer. Matt was right, jar. But Enforcer, what say you?
I wouldn't say the situation is absolutely terrible. I'm still thinking, though, they eventually have to evacuate him. I mean, they're putting this stuff out on blast right now on social media in Russia. And with the whole deal that happened just recently with the Lunin mutiny that was quickly thwarted by the Russian government, that's already made the Putin government look weak. If they allow these people to just keep sitting there with a limited amount of access they have left to the internet, and they keep broadcasting out forever long, they keep the internet on in Crimea, that they're suffering and it's basically the apocalypse in Crimea as far as how it's going, that's not going to bode well in Russia whatsoever, because we can see that these people in Crimea aren't making the appeal of, as people, as Ukrainian people in Crimea, please help us. They're saying, as Russians, we need help, because we are a part of the Russian Federation, because the Crimean Peninsula, as many people may or may not know, has been considered by Russia a republic of the Russian Federation since 2014, really more so since 2015. But it's been a part of Russia in the Russian mind for 11 years. So it's not like an occupied territory suffering where it's just, those lesser Ukrainians, the inferior peoples that are suffering and dying in the Russian mind. These are the grand Russian people, the people that the Russian government are supposed to be helping and protecting, and this whole entire war is being fought under the guise of trying to protect the Russian people from a genocidal Ukrainian regime that hates them. And it's really hard to keep that kind of propaganda initiative going when any Russian has Telegram, which is basically all of them still, get on Telegram and they see the quote-unquote Russians, in air quotations, in Crimea screaming as loud as they can, "We're all dying here. You have to help us. You can't leave us to die like this."
Now, remember, by the way, I want my credit. I want my credit on this one because I was adamant about this. I said that they were going to leave them to die down there. Now, obviously, that's nothing to be prideful about. It's going to turn into an absolute tragedy. So we'll probably be seeing unfortunate scenes unfold in the coming weeks. But also remember the other prediction I made. I said Putin's going to shut off the internet inside of Crimea because you mentioned all these these Russians in Crimea. They're going to be using the internet to try to rally people to support them inside of Crimea. But Putin doesn't want that. If he's leaving the people to die down there and he doesn't care what's happening, he doesn't want people to hear all those cries for help. They're going to end up shutting the internet off, and they're going to blame it on Ukrainian attacks. They're going to say, look, Ukraine's hit so much infrastructure, the internet went out because they hit so much infrastructure, we can't support the internet. It's not the Russian government turning it off intentionally. That will be the narrative. But they're shutting it off because it just can't remain on because of the infrastructure attacks. That's what's going to happen. And you won't hear a peep out of Crimea. And you'll occasionally get time and time again, maybe a couple of clips out of there of just pure chaos, martial law essentially going to effect. And it's going to turn into an absolute shit show down there. So that's my guess. Putin is not going to accept a defeat in Crimea simply to save innocent civilians. He's not going to do that. He's going to let those people die a slow death.
I have a feeling. I have a feeling, folks. I'm still thinking because this is going to be unheard of in modern history if they just allow everybody to start dying off inside of Crimea. I'm thinking that the situation is probably going to go on maybe for another week or two, and people are going to start dying of famine or thirst within Crimea, and then they're going to try and pull off a full-blown evacuation once it becomes so bad they can't even deny it or really even hide it, much like Chernobyl, because they were going to deny and hide in the Soviet Union the Chernobyl nuclear disaster until it became completely undeniable in the West and the Soviet Union that was going on, and only then did they start to conduct evacuations of the people within the affected areas and begin the liquidation process. Outside of that, they were going to do absolutely nothing if it was up to them, and I think they're working off of the same sort of an idea right now in Crimea. They're going to try and ignore it and bury the situation for as long as possible, and a decent amount of people, probably thousands of them, are probably going to die in Crimea because they're stuck there without any help. But once they see that it's so bad that the Russian public knows how bad it is, and it's become unavoidable to not address, I have a feeling they're still going to try and conduct a full-blown evacuation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
I don't think the evacuation's coming, but also another thing that could be done here, Ukraine has a brilliant opportunity right now because the people in Crimea are getting cut off and they're stuck. They're left there and they're going to be getting increasingly irritated with Vladimir Putin and his regime because they feel abandoned. They're going to get very disillusioned with the Russian government. This is a perfect opportunity for Ukraine to try to drop pamphlets or something to get the Crimean civilians that are Russian inside that territory to turn against the armed forces that Russia has left there and start sending information about their whereabouts so that way Ukraine can target them more accurately, and perhaps even some of these civilians conduct sabotage attacks against their own military that's left inside of Crimea with the promise that Ukraine will send in humanitarian aid to help these people out and also start limited raids from the shores of Crimea to start securing that area. That's a possibility as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say that might actually be a decent possibility. Also, I saw someone say in the chat, did Crimea truly vote to return back to Russia? It's a very interesting story. The answer is really no, but yes, if you hear the Russians, oh yes, we had the referendum, but I'll tell you how it went. When the Donbass conflict started in 2014, simultaneously as the whole Donbass uprisings happened, the Russian military rolled out of Sevastopol port, ground forces did of the naval infantry, and they just started to drive through Crimea and physically state that they were taking control of it, and they were, because there were no Ukrainian forces that were reacting to them and stopping them, because they were in complete shock of what was happening and were completely unprepared at the time. And so, while these Russian forces were driving out of Sevastopol and just driving from city to city and claiming that they are now a part of the Republic of Crimea and claiming that they were not the Russian army, a small group of Ukrainian civilians that were Ukrainians for I guess you could say legitimacy purposes came out and announced that the Crimean Peninsula was seceding from the state of Ukraine and they were forming the independent Republic of Crimea. Within 23 hours, they held what they called a general referendum, of which I think it was something like 90-something% of the voters in the quote-unquote referendum voted to apply for Russian statehood. They applied for Russian statehood, and 23 hours after the Declaration of Independence, Russia accepted their application to statehood and stated that the referendum was legitimate, and according to Russia, they became a part of the Russian Federation. But if you listen to that, there's no way that everybody rolled out into the streets to the ballot boxes in a general election in 23 hours from its announcement. That whole thing is bullshit. What the Russians
They
did,
definitely did, man. They rolled out the battle boxes more like it.
yeah, I mean, what they really did, folks, is the truth. This is the truth of the matter. They rolled the Russian army out, they annexed Crimea, and the whole civilian side of things where they announced independence and then ran a referendum and then applied for statehood and Russia accepted it. That was all just a sham to make it look like it was semi-legitimate, but the whole thing was done by the Russian army. It was going to be annexed regardless whether they had a referendum or not. The referendum was there to just make it look a little bit more legitimate than what it was, which was an armed takeover of Ukrainian territory. So I hope that addresses that the best I can. And in the meantime, we actually have a little poll to address. Well, actually, we've already addressed that poll. Sorry, Mandy. I saw your text message there, and I was like, I think that's probably about a poll or something like. But anyways, moving on from that, we've also been able to see that near to the waterways around the Kerch Strait, the Ukrainians have hit another large ferry within the port overnight, the SKS-1. Which was hit, and we can see firm satellite confirming a fire within that area. And we also were able to see that there was an explosion in the city, most likely from that ship. Take a listen.
It sounds like a ship.
Does sound like a ship.
You can just tell by the hit. If it goes boom, that's maybe on land. If it goes, that's a ship.
Man, it's shaking them timbers. Yarr! Man, moving us on from that, we also were able to see that apparently a large amount of Russian ships are now attempting to head to Temryuk. We can see all of them going to the anchorage of Temryuk down here to try and escape and find safe refuge where the Ukrainians will not blast them in the middle of the Sea of Azov. And in the meantime, we were able to see one of these ships, well, actually several of them, on fire out there in the Sea of Azov in this picture. What a scene, really. I mean, it's one hell of a scene right there. Moving us on out of that, though, we also were able to see a couple of other interesting videos and pictures that came out from the Azov today. For one, we were able to see the Ukrainian drones which have been conducting strikes on the tankers over the course of this day. There's not a lot of them left out there anymore in the Sea of Azov, and so these are the very few that are still wandering around out there. And just look at it. Goodness, bleed.
Hitting them left and right. Look at that. The point of fire. The fire point.
Man, why in the world does their symbol look like a Klingon symbol? Kapla.
They've got that bat left.
Kalis. But moving us on from that, we also were able to see another burning ship in this clip. There it is out there. Many of these drone attacks have proven to be wildly successful against Russian Federation vessels that are inside the Sea of Azov. And as you will also know, which we'll be getting into here very soon, the Ukrainians' land-based attacks against the Russian Federation's critical infrastructure have also been quite successful. The Russians are running into a bit of a problem. They are not really effectively intercepting or destroying a large number of these drones that are being launched into the seas of Azov, or the surrounding seas around Crimea, or, for that matter, over land. And they're trying to fix that problem the best the best they can. But in the meantime, to show you all more of the damage inside of the sea, or the Sea of Azov, we were able to see this bridge that was burnt out from a Ukrainian attack, making the ship inoperable.
Dang, man, they burned this down to the bare metal. Like, it looks like the thing's been scrapped for parts.
Man, it looks like a ghost ship.
Yeah, really. That's unbelievable. That's insane.
Honestly, man, it's nuts. Just, he's looking around in disbelief. And man, they're playing some real drum and bass with that.
Oh, the song was horrendous. I heard it earlier. It was garbage.
Man, you know what that song sounds like? That sounds like that stupid song where they go, eep, ah. Bro, like, it's like, oh my God.
I think it was actually more of like a thing that went, ah, ah.
Oh, so every modern musician.
I think it's more Middle Eastern type beat.
Oh, well, I mean, close enough. We also were able to hear that 17 ships have been hit over the past 24 hours in the Strait. over a myriad of smaller attacks. And like I was telling you a little while ago, these attacks are proving to be quite devastating at sea and on land in Russia. And Russia has been trying their hardest, folks. They've been putting their best men forward, the best equipment forward, into finding out and discovering how in the world they're going to be able to deal with these sorts of Ukrainian drone menaces. They are going to make sure, hell or high water, that their best men and their best equipment are put up to the job to finally make sure that this drone menace is dealt with once and for all. I introduce y'all the special Russian Air Defense Forces.
Oh? Oh my god! Holy shit! Holy shit, man! I've never seen anything like that in my life.
Oh, let's watch it again.
Oh my god! Holy crap! Dude, that dude over there on the left right here has got reflexes that are unbelievable. That dude almost got mowed in half.
Oh man! Hold up, man. Let me run this thing at a slower speed here, so that way we can really break this down. All right, so here we go. He begins firing, and the gun. And also, I need to explain why all of this happened. So this is a 12.7 millimeter minigun. And I need to show. Let me show you where these usually are. Mandy, where do you think they usually use those kinds of guns? Take a guess.
I'm on the back of a truck.
No, these are the guns that are famous for being on the Mi-24 Hinds in that little turret on the front. So usually these things are strongly mounted and never operated by hand, because they're only found on attack helicopters. So the Russians apparently have been taking a lot of these little Yak-B guns, the 12.7 millimeter miniguns, out of storage and trying to figure out something to do with them, since they've got them and plenty of 12.7 to go with them. So they put one of them on a mount that they like jerry-rigged up on the back of this truck, and they tried to run it. But the thing about it is, though, it's got a humongous amount of centrifugal force because of the spinning of the barrels and the recoil of it going with it as well, apparently. And also, it's got a lot of force behind it that they did not factor in. So the guy starts firing it, and we can see that the centrifugal force literally picks the guy up and just starts flinging him around in a clockwise motion instantly. This instructor...
Man, there is zero. There is like, oh my god, that is crazy how close that was to that guy. It's wild too. There is like zero resistance on the swivel mount. Like the swivel mount's like greased up with WD-40. That thing's swiveling around with zero resistance.
So then our hamster up here on the hamster wheel, who's holding on to the Yak-B, he goes flying around. He goes flying off. The gun's still firing, by the way. The whole time he's flying off of the truck, it's firing over his head. You can see it right there. So there he goes, flying off. And then the gun keeps spinning. All the little links and also the shells from the gun are still flying through the air, and it's spinning at an extreme speed. So then the instructor, or the quote-unquote instructor, he finally pops back up over here. Alive, surprisingly, and absolutely shot. And you just see he's so disoriented, doesn't even know what the hell happened to the guy who was on the gun, and now he's no longer there. He never saw him go flying off of the truck, so he's looking around for him, trying to see if he's still in one piece. And then he looks at the gun, and he realizes it's still spinning.
Yeah. Look at him. He's like, what the hell? He's probably wondering if the guy got chopped up that was the gunner. He probably wondered about that. Did the guy burn his hand, by the way? The guy that got flung off the gunner? It looked like he tried to grab the barrel and he burned his hand in the meantime.
Oh, no, Matthew. That was the instructor. We got the longer version of this clip here in a minute. This is the short version of the action, but let's watch it one more time in its full glory, and then we'll get into the long version of the clip and show you all that beauty. Actually, let me get the audio here. It's better with the audio. Here we go. So here it is again.
Damn.
So now here is the full-length clip right down here that shows y'all everything that happened from start to finish. So here we go again.
Oh.
So now the instructor gets up.
Thing's spinning like a fidget spinner.
Oh yeah, man, here comes the beauty of it all right? So the gun's spinning at like at 1,000,000 miles an hour, right? This thing could be used to enrich uranium at this point with how fast it's spinning. So this guy is trying to slow it down. So he starts grabbing onto the giant barrel, like the drum for the ammo that's next to the gun. And he just keeps tapping it to try and slow it down. So here in a second, he pulls the master move only an instructor would. You know, someone with years of experience under their belt. He touches the barrel.
Oh, let's see this. That was hot as shit.
Bro, look at his reaction. Bro, he got burned. Bro, you know his hands probably got 3rd-degree burns all over the bottom of it now from touching the barrel. Look at this.
Oh my God. Bro, I've never seen nobody move the hand that fast. That dude pulled that hand off like a supersonic speed, man. Back that up and play it again. Look at him. Damn, like he got bit by a snake.
Bro, man, that's like his hand got blown up by a grenade, bro. He like flung that thing around fast. Dude, I mean, like, you know, if that guy could move his arm like that every day, he might have a good chance at being a pitcher in the MLB. You know, he's got a strong arm there. Then he finally gets up and sees that the guy over there is alive. And then one of them says that they shot him in the knee. They didn't, by the way. A 12.7 would blow his leg off, so he's kidding around about that. But now one of them just goes climbing up top. And you can actually, by the way, folks, to show you how hot the barrel is, you can actually see the smoke coming off of the barrels right there. And that guy touched him with his hands.
Man, every single person involved with this is like stupid as hell, like IQ of like 20.
And now we, you know what? Now that we've seen it all, folks, we've seen everything here. It's time to go back and get that nice little treat at the start. We're never going to see anything like this again, folks, I don't think, for the rest of the war. So let's watch it one more time before we move on.
Damn, I just can't believe that. That might be the biggest blunder I've ever seen the Russians even conduct in training. That's a hell of a blunder there.
I don't know, man. That one time they had the Tunguska spin its barrel around and chew through that little car that everyone was in. That was another one that was really... Have you seen that before?
Maybe so, maybe.
Oh, man, that's a clip for the ages. This is like from years ago, though. But anyways, moving us on out of that little air defense clip, Moscow is under attack right now and was under attack earlier from drones, which we were able to get reports of. And we also were able to see that apparently the Russians might have shot down some of these drones over a residential neighborhood, which caused a great deal of fires in the area from the debris. There's the drone getting shot down, actually. And then in the next clips, we can then see that it started a massive fire in the streets after they shot it down in the middle of a neighborhood. Moving us on from that, there's the clip again. That dog sounding distressed.
That's a dog cry right there.
That dog wasn't going, bro, it's going, like, it's like, okay, calm down, buddy.
Man, that's what that guy who touched that hot barrel was wanting to do after he touched it. He was wanting to go, yipe, yipe, yipe. He burned that hand off good.
Man, he toasted that thing. We also got some fresh clips from the Sizran attack yesterday of the drones that were flying in, quite literally completely unopposed. Here's the first one.
Бля, еще нахуй.
Here comes the second. And the last, the third.
Ебать, они здоровые, ебать.
There's Sizran over there.
Блять. Еще нахуй.
And
Еще
finally the
летит,
third one.
ебать.
But that's the end of that clip. Now it's time to get to today's attack down in Saratol. Well, actually, Stavropol. Just north of Stavropol, within Mikhailovsk, we were able to see that the Ukrainians hit a little fuel depot, and it caused a minor incident.
Oh, wow. That's a big one there.
Matthew, this is minor. This is a small incident. The Russian government is on top of it, and the damage was only caused by falling debris. Man. Something else, though. Moving us on from that, we got another clip of it as well, right here. Anthony, is that you filming?
Sounds like me.
Man,
yeah,
like,
really.
Man, whoa, that's a big fan. Like, you now see another clip of it, the fireball. And we also have one final clip to show y'all here. One more, right here.
Oh, wow.
I wonder if you can feel it from there.
Oh, yeah, I bet you can.
Man, I bet you,
This
man,
dude's peeking around the windows like he's like scared of a boogeyman like breaking in or something like that. It's like it's not gonna come after you. Like it's gonna stay where it's at.
man, he expects that fire to sit there, man, and turn into a human and, like, you know, high step over this house, open the door, and go, "Hey, get out!" Like, yeah, man, like it's the fighter, man. Moving us on Stavropol, we also were able to hear that apparently there's been more strikes on Azov port today. Oh, and someone's playing That Country in the background, so we'll have to mute that. When you see them showing the smoke already rising from the prior impacts on the port, and y'all are about to see a brand new, fresh impact on this port, right where my mouse cursor's at, right there. There's the hit. Now, moving us on from that clip in the port of Azov, we also were able to see that apparently 2 flamingos were fired into Krasnodar today, although we didn't know where they went, and we never got confirmed impacts. We also were able to see that some ships were burning in the distance, seen from Mariupol city. There they are out there. You can see the burning plumes of smoke all the way from the city of Mariupol, to give y'all an idea of how bad it is right now in the Azov. And we also were able to hear of new ongoing drone attacks with a large amount of their vectors heading into the Sea of Azov, Crimea, and the Russian Don regions around Krasnodar. So moving us on out of all this news within the south, we have one more clip to show y'all before we move on. A air defense clip that came out from Odessa beach today showing the Ukrainians shooting down a drone over a beach that people were actually at in the midst of the daytime attack. Here's the clip. We see everyone trying to get out of the water as quick as possible, and we actually see the drone got shot down and hit the breakwater over there.
Damn.
Нормально.
Man, that air defense fire at the beginning almost sounded fake, but when I saw the explosion, I'm like, wow, it's not fake actually. It's just very high definition like audio.
Man, I'm not gonna lie, man. It almost sounded like a copyright free like sound bit. It sounded like it was about to say real sounds or something like in the middle of it. Like for a second there, I was like, man, that doesn't even sound real to me. Even listening to it a second time. Let's listen to that again. I mean, it was so crisp. I mean, that almost sounds like one of those propane simfire guns. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it kind of does actually. I wonder if that part was added in and only the explosion was actually in the video. Also, who's that dude like growling in the background?
I think that's the cameraman. He's like, "Oh, look at
He
it."
sounds like he's in a damn voiceover studio back there, like he's like doing a Call of Duty readout.
Man, maybe he just had like a really good microphone. Enemy in the AO, lock on tight, like or something like that. You know, I don't know. But moving us on out of Odessa, it's now time for us to finally move on and into the front lines in Ukraine, of which there isn't much more news to go, folks. I hate to say it, but the good times are about to be coming to a close. Moving us on to our location unknowns in the casualty report today, we were able to hear of the following losses, including 5 Bobcats.
Oh wow,
Oh,
that's good right there. I like to see those Bobcat losses going back up. But tell us more.
We love to see them, and of course I'm going to tell you. I'm just kidding with you, by the way. Bob Mystic, here for the record stated, 15 ground robotic complexes is tied for the 3rd highest, not shown unfortunately. 428 supply trucks is the 20th highest loss, and July is tracking slightly below June levels in most categories. And over the course of the past 24 hours, we were able to see that 1,320 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 6 APCs, 428 supply trucks, 4 main battle tanks, 53 artillery pieces, 2,034 drones, 4 MLRSs, 2 cruise missiles, and 5 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, a very good day for the armed forces of Ukraine, and they are continuing to inflict significant losses onto the Russian armed forces. We were able to see that within the Severoslavyansk front, the Ukrainians were continuing to hit and destroy Russian positions, including this wonky little 469 right here. But here's the clip. You see the Skulls having a great time, and the Russians are about to become those. And you see this little crappy 469 getting its electronic warfare system blown up. We also see another one getting blown up, along with a dish.
That's the most janky dish I've ever seen in my life. It's some rusty dish.
Bro, that thing was made out of an old skillet.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know they saw the truck. I thought they were going for the guys on the street. You also see them going for some more Russians on the streets. And that's the end of that clip. But moving us on from that, and on out of that little bit of news, we were also able to see within the Konstantinivka front, the Russians trying to make their way to town. Quite a lot of refuse on the street.
I'm not even sure if this can be called a street anymore.
I think this guy almost lost it right there. Like, that man started bucking a little too hard. I was like, he's about to lose it. But he surprisingly didn't. Meanwhile, near the Dobropilia front, we also got to see the Russian POV within this area. Oh, they got that. They got that drum and bass. Oh, like, okay.
Why they gotta add in the music like 3 seconds, 4 seconds after? It's like they're making you like unmute it and then they throw the music in right after.
Man. Oh my god. Speaking of which, while they're playing the loud drum and bass, they're driving the roadniks around, bro. The absolute janky things.
Look at it.
Oh my god.
That's crazy, man. They're swerving around like a piece of crap. That little junker going through that junk. You can't tell the destroyed ones from the one that works.
Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's what they're aiming for. It doesn't work, though. I mean, they still get them.
Yeah, this is just crazy.
Oh my god. Is that one of them? Or is that one destroyed? That one's destroyed. I was about to say, is that one of them? I was like, oh my god. Tough times to be a Russian these days, folks. It's brutal, really. Man. You know, I always heard folks, the Russians used to say, I'm not a criminal, I'm a businessman, and my business is crime. And, you know, they were really hardcore on that, you know, like that like clip right there. But we also got to see a supply truck burning near Donetsk. There it is, a Ural. A nice vintage. But that's all of the clips that we had from the front line today. Largely, the Ukrainian front was somewhat inactive in terms of video and picture evidence today, but was very active in real life. We just didn't get a lot of videos to show it. But with that in mind, folks, it is time for us to move on and into our final poll. At least for the news, that is. We might have more polls in the question segment. But as a lot of people are seeing that Ukrainians continue the attacks on Russian ships in the Azov, a lot of people are wondering, what can Russia really do about that? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? What are you thinking about that as well?
And it looks like 20% of the people said that Russia could overcome these Ukrainian attacks on Russian ships near Crimea by sending even more ships to try to overwhelm and, you know, break through the attacks that Ukraine's conducting. 63% said there is no real defense and they're pretty much screwed. And 10% said they can call in some more of that jet air support that is pretty much useless. We've seen Russian jets flying around the area, but largely they're there just for show. They'll fly around buzzing the area, but there's really not much shooting down going on for the most part. They just like fly around going, where is it? Where is it? And then the ships are blowing up underneath them left and right. In my opinion, there is really no defense. And that's why we're seeing such carnage right now in the Sea of Azov, because there is no defense. The drones are coming in, they're hitting ships left and right, and that's just the end of it. So the Ukraine's effectively cutting off and blockading any ship traffic to Crimea for the most part. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, sadly, folks, it's kind of cold. The game's cold. There's really not a lot they could do because the Russians already closed down all the ships from going into the Azov because, yeah, you really can't justify a Ukrainian drone that cost a couple of $1,000s to build, and the Ukrainians have thousands of them, to be equivalent to a Russian ship that usually is tens of millions of dollars, even for the small ones that are being knocked out right now. So the Russians really don't have the ability to say, let's take 2,000 ships, I just fling them into the Azov and lose all of them, which would be tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions in losses, so that way we can try and keep Crimea fed when the drones that Ukraine's flinging at these ships are only costing thousands of dollars. It's a losing game for the Russians. They really can't shoot them down. They can't get enough ships to overwhelm the Ukrainians. And there was really nothing that they can do. They're kind of just screwed at this point. So it was a good run while they had it, but the run's over and the jig is up. So there's not really a lot more to say. Like, they're kind of screwed. But with that, I hope I've been able to address that poll well. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on and into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. Y'all made it through another 2 hours and 20 minutes of news today. And I have to say a humongous thanks to every single one of y'all once again for watching so far. The question segment's always fun, folks. Make sure to stick around because we got plenty of fun stuff to talk about. But y'all made it through the meat of the matter, the news today. And I've got to give y'all a humongous thanks and a shout out to each and every single one of y'all for enjoying the show, and also the just raw amount of y'all who have been here. We've had 24,500 people here at the peak, and 155,000 people have watched this show up till this point right now, which is absolutely incredible, and we're always amazed and truly honored to know that many of y'all consider this to be your primary source of news. And so, with that in mind, it's time for us to get on and into them questions. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so it's now time for our final question segment of the night and get our live chat questions, call off our top donors, and get some super chats too that we got tonight as well. So jumping right into that, also by the way, a huge shout out to everybody once again for the fundraiser. It's currently sitting at $2,334 raised, about $334 above the goal. And fantastic work once again, and a huge shout out to the LSA for making that possible once again tonight, because now the Ukrainians are turning the war around, and also now they're getting support once again from the LSA on another Sunday night fundraiser. So a big shout out. And also, in the meantime, a big shout out to BC Skyman. He put in a $50 support to the fundraiser, and a big shout out to BC for making that fundraiser possible yet again. But with that, folks, it's now time to get our super chats and live chat questions. And we're going to start with our super chats, of course. And the first one here is going to go to none other than Rosalie Love, who said, no question tonight, but the nuke debate the other night was stellar and very civilized and proud of the LSA.
Civilized? I think you so much for supporting all this channel to keep on running. And we always like to keep the conversation civil and interesting.
Oh, the nuke debate. She said the nuke debate. It just registered in my head what she was saying. That nuke debate was an interesting one. We might have to bring that back.
Oh well, I mean, I got a casserole in the oven right now. I think I got to attend to that. But beyond that, though, it was an interesting one. I'd say a very, very polarizing one for sure, but an interesting one, I would say. But we generally don't like to get into polarizing conversations on the channel. Whenever we see something is very polarizing and people get very up in arms about it, either in one way or another, we usually don't bring those up again because we try and make sure the conversations are civil, and that one went way out of control fast, at least in the audience or the live.
It wasn't my fault.
Well, I mean, kind of. It
was your fault.
It was my fault.
Yes, you should just agreed with me.
Dang. It's kind of rough. Damn.
But beyond that, cult of Matt, it demands yes men. Have you ever heard of a no man in a cult? I've never heard of a no man.
I've never heard of that. I'm the enforcer. I'm not in the cult.
Who said you had a choice in the matter?
Me.
Well, I'll let that slide. Like occasionally, you have to be smart enough to let stuff slide. Occasionally, you have to sort of let it slide. Like you have to pick and choose your battles. They say you don't know to go around like brawling and tuning everybody up. You can't be doing that. That gets you in trouble. The United States tried that, and they look, we're in trouble. So pick and choose. They say I'm going to have to not pick and not choose in this one.
Man, honestly, I'd have to agree. But beyond that, though, I do have to say a big thanks to your support and of this channel to keep running, and always proud to be a part of the LSA. I hope everyone is. And long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never truly die. And a big thanks to you once again for being here tonight, Rosalie. Great to see you. And with that, we're on the next one.
And our next one here goes to Cerebros3. And thank you very much, Cerebros, for that $20 support as well. And we do appreciate that very, very much. Cerebros said, busy today, so I can't stay, but wanted to thank enforcers for the news and the donating to the fundraising. And stay safe and take care of yourself and others. And one from the chat, please.
Hey, and a big thanks to you for support, Cerebros. And a big thanks to you for helping the channel to keep on running with your super chat there. And I'll have to say, hopefully everyone is staying safe and taking care of themselves. And we will make sure to get one from the chat in your honor. So what do we got, Matthew?
And look at what we have here. Patty Mayo put in a question right there in the chat. We're going to grab Patty Mayo's question from the live chat in honor of Cerebros 3. And Patty Mayo said, question, I live in Key West, and I'm interested to know your thoughts on the reality of Iran using drones via Cuba, given all the escalation. Now, Patty, we'd actually reported on this. I would say, I think it was about... Yeah, it was about 2 months ago, I think, at this point. There was a report, a very credible intelligence report out there that Iran or Russia had supplied about 300 Shahed attack drones to Cuba. Now, that was never independently verified. That was according to national security reports, so we kind of went with it, and that still seems to be the case. And they have a range of about 1,500 miles on those drones, about 1,000 to 1,500 miles on them. So it puts southern Florida within their range. So it's a real possibility, but I'm not sure if Iran would really go that far, because that would invoke a very huge escalation, to say the least. I'm not sure if Iran really wants that type of escalation, because really what would their objective be by doing that? Basically just causing hellfire on Iran's what that would cause. So there's really no upside to Iran to do it unless they just want, more escalation. So it's possible, but I think it's still unlikely. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, first off, man, we got to scoop everyone. Patty Mayo's from Key West, but also, all jokes aside, to answer the question, it's a great question. As far as the drones are concerned, we actually did cover that a few months ago, and apparently it's starting to make the rounds again. Like it's kind of like bubbled back up to the surface, and everyone's like, "Oh, damn, there's drones down in Cuba." But back when we covered it, I said it wasn't really that big of a deal, and I kind of still of the belief it's not that big of a deal. It's not great to hear. I'll say that. But at the same time, 300 drones, because I think that's the number that they're still running with right now, with the story bubbling back up to the surface. They're either provided by Russia or they're provided by Iran, but they're provided directly to the Cuban government and the Cuban military to use autonomously. So something of an arms purchase from Cuba more so. So it's kind of like the way to look at it is. It's kind of like Belgium buying aircraft from the United States, like an F-16. That's kind of what the Cubans have done with these drones. But the thing is that they only have 300 of them. Now, the range of them is quite long. It's 1,500 miles. But there is a humongous portion of the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Ground Air Defense Forces and the U.S. Army that operate in Florida and also throughout the entirety of the U.S. Southeast and elsewhere that would be able to provide a defense against 300 drones quite easily. And considering that as long as Cuba's blockaded, they really can't get more of them, that kind of cuts down their abilities for the most part, at least in what they could do. They only have 300 chances to do something, and once they run out of those chances in those drones, it's completely out. Now, what would that really do if they hypothetically attacked the United States? They could try and attack military installations, critical infrastructure, power plants, or maybe even directly us, the citizens of the Republic, and just try and conduct an act of terror. But the problem is that they don't really have a way to defend themselves. If they conduct an attack on the United States, they have opened themselves up to being in a state of war with the United States, which means we're going all in against them. And they have absolutely no air defenses to speak of. They have no ground army or navy. So they are largely ripe for the picking at that point, as far as us just invading Cuba and wiping out their government. So in the actions to come, they might be able to land a hit or two here on us in the United States on something, a military base or a critical infrastructure item, which is probably what they go for. But they wouldn't survive what would come to follow from the U.S. because outside of those drones, they have nothing else in their military to speak of. And usually when people say that, it's a big exaggeration, like with Iran. People go, "Oh, they don't have a military." It's like, well, they do. It's like we're still fighting them right now. But with Cuba, they literally have none. I mean, we saw them pulling around a gush gun on an ox cart about a month back. I mean, they've got literally nothing down there.
Yeah, they really don't have anything. I just wonder what type of U.S. response on Iran. Like, I think that would almost guarantee that Cuba would get invaded at that point. If Cuba was involved or participated whatsoever in launching drones that were supplied by Iran on southern Florida, that would almost guarantee an invasion, I would say. So I wonder what the U.S. would do to Iran, though. Would they jump to nuclear weapons? I mean, what are they going to do at that point? Not to reopen that. I'm not going to say my opinion on it, but I wonder what the U.S. would actually decide to do. Would they start launching some larger attacks against them? I wonder what.
I think we'd probably just invade them. I mean, we wouldn't nuke them. like
Invade Iran?
Oh no, not invade Iran. I mean, invade Cuba, because the problem isn't with Iran. The problem would be with Cuba at that point, because if Cuba has the drone, like they might have been given by Iran or Russia, and I think if I'm not mistaken, Matthew, the story is that they were given by either the Russians or the Iranians. It's not really clear which.
Nobody's sure which, but the Shahed is a Iranian-produced drone, and Russia only licensed produces them, so it's technically a Iranian creation.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, that would be like saying, the Ukrainians shot a Russian soldier with a UAR-15, and the AR-15 is an American design, so that means America's at war with us, we need to nuke them. That would be a hard one to make the hurdles work, no matter who it is or what we're working with. If it's like an off-brand Russian Shahed, which would be Garan 2, really none of that matters. It's kind of getting into the weeds of it. It's the Cubans that have them, and it's the Cubans that would be using them, so our war would be directly with Cuba. Because if we give Ukraine bombs in the Ukraine war, and Ukraine bombs the Russians with them, the Russians don't go, "Oh, that is America at war with us, we're nuking the United States today." Because it's the Ukrainians that are using the bomb against them, so the war still stays contained between those two. So we would be at war with Cuba. Regardless of where the weapons come from, that wouldn't really affect them. We would definitely be in a bad foreign policy position with them, but we wouldn't be going to war with them or anything like that. We would be going to war with Cuba. And also on top of that, another thing to think of as well, like thinking of this, Patty Mayo, to answer the question, if a drone blew up on the United States and it hit a military base or it hit a power plant and it knocked the power out for people in, say, like Florida where you're at, or if it hit like Key West and it caused a mass casualty incident for civilians, that's just going to get the U.S. population to rally behind the U.S. government in doing something about them. Because at that point, we're the I guess you could say we're the ones aggressed upon. We're like the innocents in Florida were slaughtered at the hands of a Cuban drone attack, and people would demand justice for that. I mean, like the truth of it is, folks, and I know a lot of people say, oh, these people would roll over if something like that happened. When you look at 9/11, it didn't matter what side anyone was on. Everyone rallied together about going over there and doing something about the people who conducted 9/11. If Cuba did something like that with the drones, I feel like the response would be identical. Everyone's going to rally around the concept of being Americans and avenging the slain, and then Cuba is screwed. I mean, because there would be a unified government in the Congress and the executive to go after them. The public would be in support of it. The Cuban government wouldn't survive. So I think if anything, they have them just kind of to have them, because if they ever try to use them, it's a lose-lose for them. I mean, they either all get shot down and then they get invaded, or they hit something in America, and then it creates a rallying cry in the country to avenge the slain or to avenge the attack, and then they get steamrolled afterwards anyway. So I would say it's concerning, but as far as what would happen afterwards, they're kind of deadlocked into doing nothing, and it's just kind of there to be there, at least from what I'm seeing.
And also, it looks like while the story's not getting national attention anymore, because it was reported, I think, about a month or two ago, the story broke about the 300 drones being inside of Cuba. It looks like just 3 or 4 days ago, according to The Hill, it looks like Jeb Bush inside of Florida was saying that the drones are still a major threat and poses a concern to regional stability and potential threats to the United States. So it seems to be that the analysis has sort of like narrowed in from Russia or Iran providing the drones. Now they seem to be suggesting that Iran armed Cuba with 300 drones. They seem to be more directly saying that Iran did it instead of Russia. So I would imagine that Iran did it. And, that's not quite as severe as the Soviet crisis with Cuba, but it's still, pretty on up there.
Oh no, it's nowhere near as severe. I mean, with the new, Cuban Missile Crisis, those were IRBMs, I believe, at the time with MIRVs on them that could target 1,500 miles in the United States with nuclear warheads. A Shahhead can get nowhere close to that kind of damage. I mean, you could put all 300 of them together and hit the same place at the same time. It wouldn't even be close to a single IRBM. And the Russians had dozens in Cuba.
Yeah, and also I see someone said, Matt, you trust The Hill? Well, I mean, Fox News also reported it too.
Well, I mean, is that really a mark of credibility? I mean, like,
I was hoping you were gonna laugh or something. I was trying to get the laugh going. Like, make it clear I'm joking, by the way, for people jumping my ass over this one.
Bro, I mean, you said that, bro. I said there, literally, like, did like a squint with my eyebrows. Like, what? I was like, Fox News? I'm like, hell no, man. Man, I'll tell you, folks. If CNN and Fox News, not to take a dig against them, but if you're counting on them for credible news, that's a bad place to put your trust. I mean, I'm just saying, in my opinion. But beyond that, though, I'd say to round it out, in my opinion, I don't really think they could do anything with the drones. They're a threat, but if they ever tried to use them, they're going to get crushed, and that's kind of the limiter to them. So I hope that answers your question well, Petty Mayo, and also great to see you here. And also, I hope you've been enjoying the stream tonight. Long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, living in Key West down there, living it up apparently in Key West. I've never been down that far. Let's see down the map, by the way. Let's see. That's Key West way down there. As far south as we've ever been in Florida is Miami, the downtown area, and it was extremely crowded. But yeah, I've heard Key West is pretty nice. It's kind of different, but I've never seen it in person though. The water looks nice. I'll say that.
Let's do a street view. I've never, honestly, folks, I've never really looked at Key West. So let's do, where in the world do we want to see, though? I'm going to pull out the man. Where do we want to drop the man?
Drop them toward the coast.
Let's see, where would be a good spot? Maybe over here near the ships. Oh, this is actually cool. Actually, it's like a big tourist village sort of a thing. That's neat.
That's like what Cuba could have been if they weren't commie.
Man, this is kind of like Cuba when it was under Bautista. You know, the dictator who ran Cuba before, let's see, it was Fidel Castro.
Yeah. Oh, look, they even had a Häagen-Dazs over there.
Oh, look at that. Man, let's see. They got that. They got the greenhouse. Oh, they selling that weed. They're like, oh, that's the green. Like, oh, okay. Like they selling like plants in there or something. And then they got Fat Tuesday. Jokes on them. That's every day for me. We also see Sunset Water Sports. Honestly, it looks like a nice place, though. I'm not gonna lie. Like, looks like a really neat place. The only thing I've ever seen actually from Key West is this one cop body cam where like these two mounted police officers like came up upon this like homeless woman and she was absolutely off her rocker. Like she like punched a horse, she punched a cop, spit in his face, and they were like having to like slam her to the ground and stuff because of all that. It was a whole deal. Like that's the only thing I've ever seen from Key West is I've never looked at it for some reason because it's always like I've always heard it's such a long drive to get down there and like apparently you can fly down there. I didn't know that. Oh yeah, you actually can fly down there. I never knew that. I thought you had to drive down there, but I always thought it was just so far away it'd never be a chance to get down there. But really cool place actually. It looks pretty neat. And maybe one day we'll take a visit down there and take a little gander around. But anyways, also Patty Man just said that horse just died. Oh, that's unfortunate. I hate to hear that. I love horses. Like I think horses are so cool. They're so neat of an animal. I hate hearing about them when they pass away and stuff.
Let's see here. What is the temperature in Key West? Let's see what that is. Kind of curious. Well, it's
Also, Hal Rose just
86.
threw in a. Mhm.
Oh wow, Hal Rose did throw in a $333
Holy
donation right there.
moly!
Dang, that's nice. We're now over $2,600 raised right now. A
Damn.
huge shout to Hal Rose, by the way. That's fantastic. I gotta say, huge shout to Hal for that generosity right there. Also, it's apparently 90 degrees high and 85-degree low in Key West. So it's actually colder in Key West than it is in Salt Lake City, Utah right now. Salt Lake City, Utah is hot as hell. It got up to like 110 today. And it was hot. It was extremely hot. Somebody
Yeah.
collapsed down the road from me, and I saw ambulances and fire trucks going over there, and I was looking out the window thinking, damn, what happened? And I was like, oh, dang, somebody collapsed over there. Like, and I can understand why. It was boiling.
Shoot.
But yeah, it's colder in Key West.
It was the hottest day in recorded history here in Salt Lake City today, folks. It hit 109 degrees. The highest temperature that ever has been recorded, the heat record until today was 107 degrees, and it only hit that. Remember, everyone, the weather report for Salt Lake City and the recorded weather started in 1871. So we're counting from there on up. The temperature only hit 107 degrees in 1960, 2020, and twice in 2022. And now it's hit 109 this year in 2026. I think y'all might be noticing a pattern there. We have actually five, if we count them right. We have 5 different instances where it hit 107 degrees. 4 of those were within the last 5 years. I'm not trying to say anything there, but I am saying something. That's a little bit interesting. But anyways, with and also, I mean, like it's been brutal out here today. They always tell you it's a dry heat, and it is, but dry heat will still get you. Actually, dry heat's pretty bad if y'all don't know. I actually was listening to someone talk about it. Apparently, in a dry heat, you don't even know that you're basically dehydrating yourself to death when you're out there in the heat because your sweat almost it basically evaporates right when it forms on your skin.
That's what
So
you want. That's what you want though. Like the sweat is removing the heat from your body. That's the way I understand it. So you want the evaporation. If you're getting extremely hot in a humid environment, that's where the huge danger comes into play because then that heat's getting trapped right on your body. At least that's the way I understand it. Somebody can correct me if that's all messed up.
the water actually creates a barrier to cool, like keep you cool. Like that's kind of like the interesting thing about sweating is that it releases the heat, but it also like the water from your sweat kind of helps to cool you down a little bit. When your sweat evaporates right off of you instantly in a dry heat, you're not getting that cooling effect from your sweat, even like the little bit that it provides, and then that could end up causing other issues. So I mean, there's always a risk of dehydrating in any environment and having heat injuries and whatnot. But out here, it's apparently a lot more under the surface. It's not something that you can directly tell. Like in the South, you could be out all day and not really sweating all too much or feeling like you're sweating because it's just evaporating right off of you, and then you could just drop from heat exhaustion out of the blue and not even realize that you were that dehydrated or you were going into cramps and whatnot.
Yeah, you got to stay hydrated, some water, some stuff like that. But when it gets this hot, though, like it's wise just not to go outside if you can try to avoid it. Like 109 degrees, 110 degrees. I mean, there's only so much you can do to try to stay cool during that. Like even if you're drinking water nonstop, you can still overheat.
Yeah, and also another thing, folks, is that people say, drinking water in this way is like better, or not drinking water, or drinking a lot of water, like literally hydrating every chance. The scientific answer Not that I'm a scientist or anything, but the scientific answer, as I see it, is you drink water when you're thirsty. Like, I don't know. Like, there's so many different hydration theories that are out there these days. Like, drink like this much water every 5 minutes. It's like your body is built in with a thirst indicator, which is feeling thirsty. If you feel thirsty, drink water. Like, that's how I do it, and honestly, that's done me quite well. Is that whenever I'm out in the heat and I feel thirsty, you just drink a little bit of water. Also, let's see. I see some people saying you're wrong, and actually, Dave's ill said you're wrong about sweat evaporative cooling. It keeps happening until you run out of sweat. It happening as you sweat doesn't affect thermodynamics. I had heard from someone that it did. Maybe they were wrong.
I'm
Because
right.
so I think you are right, because from what I was hearing, it was like on a video, they were like, yeah, the dry heat's like a whole other thing. And maybe that's like a wives' tale that they heard. I took that at face value because they had lived out here and they were like, yeah, that's how it works. I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. I'm not going to say the channel, but I was like, that's interesting. I'm going to have to keep that in mind, make sure that I have like water with me and all that sort of stuff. Apparently, maybe they're wrong, because a lot of people are saying that that's wrong. So I'll have to look into that a little bit more. Maybe I got bad info there. But anyways, with
Yeah,
that,
yeah. It says here, dry heat is better for human stability because low humidity allows sweat to evaporate quickly, making the air feel less oppressive and enabling your body's natural cooling system to work effectively. So it does appear, and so it's evaporative cooling. So I was correct. When you sweat, you want that sweat to evaporate. You don't want it to stay on you and you become like heavy and sticky and sweaty. You don't really want that. That's where the danger comes into effect, because you're basically holding all that heat into your body, and that sweat is now holding that heat in. You want the water to evaporate, so that way the heat's being dispersed from your body and it's being evaporated with the water.
interesting. That the guy on that video literally explained the complete opposite. He was like, "You see, when the sweat's on you, that's good, but when it's not, that's not." I was like, "Really?" I was like, I'm here, I was sitting there in my head taking mental notes. I was like, okay, I need to keep this in mind, like so that way I don't drop from like heat exhaustion or like dehydration out here on the hikes and whatnot. I haven't been on a hike for a while, folks. The last one to Red Pine Lake, I think, wiped both Matthew and me out of hiking. I don't know if you've been hiking since, but I haven't gone back.
Yeah, I haven't been hiking since, mainly because it's been too hot. Like I just don't want to get out there and get deep into like the forest or something like that, and then just realize, oh damn, I'm like getting super hot right now, and I got to like hike 4 miles back out. It seems like it's a dangerous thing to do, so I generally haven't gone for that reason. For the most part, I haven't been able to do much outside. Like I've been going stir crazy because I've been sitting inside the house all day. I'm like, damn, like I got to get outside. But I tried getting outside today, just simply taking trash that you go throw it out, and I just that mere like 5 minutes outside, I walked back in. I was like, it didn't hit me until I walked back in. I was like, dang, man. I'm like, that is like dangerously hot out there. Like, that is crazy. You don't even realize how hot it was till you walk back inside. I'm like, you definitely can't do anything out there today. And literally nobody was out. Like, everybody was inside.
Yeah, man, remember that one time that we went to Britain and that heat wave was going through, and we were at Stonehenge, and that one person did drop off from heat exhaustion, like drop out from heat exhaustion? This story
They
is
were waterboarding them.
yeah. So some British guy, like I would have to say, folks, not stereotyping here, but everyone will know what I mean when I say this. Like your average Brexit geezer came up to this woman who was on the ground, absolutely conked out, literally like fell over from like heat exhaustion, and he comes up with a water bottle and he unscrews it. And he's just standing there, like he's not even crouched down or anything. So he's just standing there. He tips the water bottle over and just starts pouring like a drizzle of it on her face, and like you see the water streak is landing literally like right on her upper lip, like where her nose is at and stuff. So he's basically like waterboarding this one. He says,
Oh,
"Are you okay?" And you hear on the guy, it's like, oh my
oh
god,
my
stop,
God.
stop, man! Like it's like you're
Man.
waterboarding this poor lady.
Man, I remember just walking past that thinking, oh my God, like this poor lady right here, this dude over here is like waterboarding her basically. She's like conked out from a heat stroke or a heat exhaustion or something like that. It's like, what is going on? And then of course they're in the British accent too. Are you okay? Are you conscious? Quick, call an ambulance, call the bobbies. Is like, what the hell's going on out here?
I gotta say, I commend the guy for being so kind and thoughtful, but still, he was waterboarding the poor lady. Basically, I was like, oh no, like we were a lot younger back then. Like I was like 16 or so I wasn't getting in the middle of that. Be like, stop, you're waterboarding the poor lady. Like I wasn't gonna do anything like that, and no one else, like none of us intervened. So we were just like kind of walking by and watching everyone else gather around the poor lady, and we were like, oh man. That's rough. Like we were like, that's tough and hot out here. And remember, man, you know what else was cool is that when we went to Stonehenge that day, let's see, where is the Salisbury plane? Where's Salisbury? There's Salisbury. So Stonehenge is up here. Yeah, it's right here. And then this is the Royal Artillery, the British Army's artillery training grounds right here. It's not the Royal
That's
Army.
that's when the Russians killed that man.
Yeah, actually, we were there when that happened. The whole poisoning thing. Yeah, we were actually there.
Yeah.
That was the
They went and
year.
Novichoked them. They Novichoked them right as we were driving by. We had no idea that was happening. While we were driving down whatever highway that was to get down to the area, excuse me, the Russians were literally killing some guy that was like some former spy, like in Salisbury over there.
Man, I'll have to tell that story like here to say like at least when I saw him. Because remember, man, I said, wait a minute, I looked out the window. I think I saw that guy. Like he was like dressed the same way and everything. I was like, I think he was on like a park bench. But anyways, we were at Stonehenge and there was all this smoke rolling over Stonehenge like from the north, and it was so hot out there. And they had been talking about on the news in Britain the day before that there were like grass fires and whatnot happening through Britain from the heat. So we asked someone who was at Stonehenge, we're like, what's that smoke? Is that like a fire or something? No, 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 that's the artillery, the training north of us. And then if you just sat there and stopped talking and listened, you could actually hear the artillery booming in the distance as they were training out there in the field just north of Stonehenge. So then when we got done with that, we rode back down from the bus to the visitor center here, got back in the car, the rental car, and then we drove through Salisbury. And when we got to Salisbury, I think it was this park like right here or something, and we took like this turn, and I was looking out into that park while we were driving through, and there was a bench and there was a guy on it, and he had like a gray looking kind of like fedora hat on, and he had a little box in his hands, and I looked at him, I was like, oh, that's neat. And then I was like, oh, people out there enjoying the park, and we drove down to Bournemouth and got in a hotel, turn on the TV. Breaking news: the Russian Federation has just poisoned a former like double agent or something like that in a park in Salisbury, and we had just driven by while it was happening. No joke.
Yeah, and the crazy part is they apparently smeared Novichok on the dude's door handle of the home or something. So when the dude went to go grab the door handle, he apparently came in contact with Novichok, which, by the way, you don't want to come in contact with that because you literally lose the ability to breathe. Your heart stops functioning. It literally prevents pretty much every organ in your body from functioning. Highly dangerous military-grade nerve agent. So that happened, and then they had the whole like lockdown and police, response to it, and everything like that. I think they survived. I think they went into like intensive care or something. I think they both survived, but they tried to take him out, and I think his daughter too.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. It was like, oh my god, we just drove by like international news happening. We didn't even know it. Like that was really something surreal right there. And then after that, we went to the Bovington Tank Museum, which was pretty cool. Didn't really get to enjoy that as much as I wanted to though. But it was a really neat place to see. And we missed James May by a couple of days. Do you remember that?
I hated it. I was torn to shreds over that.
Man, James May, I would have loved to have seen that. It was going to be Tank Fest in Bovington, literally a few days after we would have to leave. And James May was going to be there. It was going to be a whole deal. We didn't get to sit around and wait for any of that. We had to go back to America. But it was so cool to think, oh man, we could have been at Tank Fest. And you actually get to see the tanks rolling around on the display grounds and everything. This year, actually, speaking of which, man, the Bovington Tank Fest just happened a few days ago. Do you know who the guest of honor was this time around at Bovington?
Who was it?
The King. He actually rode in a Challenger in the commander's cupola.
Honestly, that was a pretty cool place. I will say that was a pretty cool tank museum.
Yeah, man, that was a cool and really neat. I wish one day, folks, I would love to go back to Britain and get to wander around. It's just going to be hard to find the time or the money to be able to make that happen. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I see some people saying, does Novichok cause like your aorta to rupture? It doesn't cause that. Like Novichok's in the class of nerve agents that basically removes an enzyme or it disables an enzyme in the human body that controls your nerve signals, making it to your muscles. So your brain fires off signals through your nerves straight to all your muscles in your body. Your heart's also a muscle too. So if that connection between the brain through the nervous system to those organs gets disrupted, you die. Like your heart won't pump. So Novichok attacks that enzyme that controls that signal pathway. It attacks that enzyme and disrupts it. So that way your brain can't control all your bodily functions. So essentially you have nonstop convulsions, spasms, and then you die. All your organs fail at that point. It's very vicious, very vicious. North Korea used a similar agent that's like in the same family as Novichok, but it's a little bit more potent called VX. They smeared that on the face of one of Kim Jong-un's relatives at the airport in Kuala Lumpur, and they killed him that way. He died 2 hours after he got got the VX smeared on his face. So it's horrible. Like, it's a terrible way to go out. Like, absolutely awful. Pretty much everything you can imagine: nausea, losing control of literally every faculty. Literally, the whole 9 yards happens with it. It's vicious.
Yeah, it's pretty nasty stuff. Very rough, really. But with that, we're on the next one.
And our next one here goes to, actually, a big shout out to Bex Chidwood, by the way, putting a $50 support to the fundraiser. A big shout out to
Hey!
Bex for that generosity as well. We also have here another super chat from Brad Runyon. And Brad said, I appreciate all the hard work and dedication. And LLT LSA, I'll throw my question to the chat. And good evening, gents.
Have a good evening to you. I hope you've been doing well, Brad. And I got to say, thank you so much for appreciating the work and dedication here. We always try our best every single night, and I hope that tonight has been a good one indeed. And we will make sure to take one from the live chat in your honor. So, Matthew, what do we got?
And the one from the live chat goes to Howard Turgell. He said, how much is a Tomahawk missile that the U.S. is firing off?
Well, I mean, it depends on the batch, but generally they cost, I believe, about 2 million to 2.5 million a unit, from the current batch numbers that we know of. So they're very expensive. Very, very well. Actually, no, sorry. I think usually by and large they usually cost about 1.5 million. I think the most recent batch, which was one of the smallest ones, because it was so small, the price was up per unit. I think those got up to about 2 million to 2.5, but usually they're about 1.5 million, especially the older ones because they were made in large batches. So I hope that does, and also to explain the difference, just in case if people are like, well, why is that? There's a thing called economy of scale, where if you build something 100,000 times, you can make each one of those units in that 100,000 batch order cheaper. If you only make 100 of the item, because of all the tooling, the machining, the training, and everything that has to go involved in making any of them for that matter, much less just 100 of them, which is a really small number, it jacks up the price. That's why cars generally are incredibly inexpensive, although they are really kind of fine mechanical components, because a car company tools an entire assembly line in a factory to produce that specific frame and design of car in the millions over the course of probably about 10 years. And so because they're able to set up their entire tooling, their machining, their employees and their training, and then they use all of that upfront cost and then make 10 million of them, they can spread out those overall costs over far more units and lower the price. And that's the same with weapon systems. If you buy them in bulk, they're a lot cheaper than buying them in small artisanal numbers. So I hope that answers that somewhat well, at least why that is the case for some different batches of the same weapon. But with that, we're on the next one.
And also, I see Tyler Sauter asked a live chat question. He said, Matt, which one would you rather meet, Clarkson, Hammond, or May, or which one would you prefer to meet? Out of all three of them, honestly, I probably just want to meet Jeremy Clarkson out of all three. I'm a huge fan of all three of those guys, by the way. They're childhood legends of mine. Still is, by the way. And now they do their own independent stuff. They stopped making the Grand Tour. Now they do Clarkson's Farm is what he's doing independently. James May occasionally does like travel series. And I think Richard Hammond, I think he's doing like Discovery series or something like that, like with machinery and stuff like that. So they're each doing their own independent projects now. But it'd be pretty cool to meet Jeremy Clarkson out of all the bunch. But I'd like to meet all three of them, really. But moving on to our next one here, this one's going to go to Dan Stolte. And thank you very much, Dan, for that $10 support. And he said, I hope one day cool guys like you and Matt are in office. So when my two sons grow up, they have good, honest people in office. And thanks for the kind words,
really
Dan, about that.
really kind words right there. Thank you. Like that's very nice. You know, flattering very much. Like, and I would say, hopefully we could be in office. And hopefully, to get there, we don't have to end up becoming a crook. Honestly, folks, if I had to become a crook to try and become the president, I'm not becoming the president. Like, if it comes down to I get in the office, but I'm a crook, or I don't get in the office and I remain not a crook, I would rather not be a crook than a crook to be the president, if y'all see what I'm saying there. Hopefully, that would be possible. I got to say, I'm kind of on the fence about trying to run for president in 2040, which would be the first term, well, the first election that I could, because I'd be old enough. I'm kind of on the fence about it because looking at the political world these days, I'll be honest with you, sadly, I don't really think there's a place for someone like me in it. Like, you know, I get up there on the debate stage and everyone else is talking about how the other party is going to be eating your babies if they get elected. And I'm going to be up there talking about, you know, we're a great country. We can all work together to achieve great things. There's so many things that we can do and improve together as long as we work as a united nation, as one republic. And I don't really think I don't know if a lot of people are going to resonate with that.
How about this? If I could tell you that there was a way to simply propel you to the position and there was a way to get you there, and all you had to do was simply come out and give occasional rallies, speeches, and stuff like that, and you'd have a team of people behind you to propel you there, would you take it then, where you had basically like a team around you sort of making it happen?
Would there be strings attached to that?
I mean, not let's assume there's no strings attached to it. Let's just say you can get there and other people will take the hit for you. Would you take it?
It sounds vague. I'm trying to see if there's like a catch to this because, like, you're saying other people take the hit. Why would they be taking a hit if nothing was being done wrong?
Well, like if there's trouble that pops up, they simply they, like basically have PR agents at that point. If there's trouble that pops up or something in the past that they're like, oh, he did this or he blah 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 blah. There's people that simply say, here's how you deal with it. We'll do damage control. Here's what you say. Just go back out there and keep making speeches. We'll simply get you to that position. Like, would you take it at that point?
I mean, I probably would. I mean, that's just a normal like campaign like operation, though. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, for most people at least.
Well, I mean, it
I,
depends on how much funding you have. Like, I mean, if you have enough campaign funds to hire like a huge team like that, the current president had a huge team like that. He had a hell of a lot of funding behind him, and also his opponent did too, for the most part. So it really depends on your funding. But with funding though, like in the real world though, with funding comes strings attached to it. Technically, it's illegal for people to make campaign contributions and then say, "Oh, you owe me something." Like it's never said explicitly, but it's always kind of understood. Like I kind of helped you to get there, so you kind of need to wash and clean the other hand that sort of helped you with that. So it's just a dirty business politics these days. Now that money's gotten so entangled in the whole system, it's just so dirty. Like you have to have billions of dollars to be able to be elected. Like you have to put billions of dollars into advertising, hiring teams, your travel, your expenses, people knocking on doors. I mean, it's such an expensive adventure to become the president now. You're going to be entrusted, or you're going to be basically indebted to somebody. Let's just put it that way. And you're never going to be fully independent under our current system.
Politics has always been nasty. It's not just been nasty nowadays. It's been nasty for a while. Um,
It's not been like this though, because the money has gotten
oh,
way worse in the system. It's gotten way worse. Everybody likes to quote Citizens United, that whole decision. Money's gotten worse, like it has. Like there's a lot less restrictions on it now, and it's kind of accepted that's the way it is. And also, the cost of elections has gone up, even when you adjust for inflation. It's gone up by like massive, massive amounts. So it's way worse now. It's not your imagination.
well, I mean, I'm looking at it from the lens of a history major. I don't mean to say that every time, but like, have you heard about like why James Garfield was assassinated and what the reason behind that was, and like
I
how
mean, but there's always corruption though. Like you're missing my point. There's always corruption. Like there's always people doing favors for other people, but it's not built into the system. Like it was something they did, and it's always happened. But now it's literally built into the system. Like because you have to accept so much money to get elected, you have to accept billions of dollars in donations. It makes it a part of the system itself. It used to be something where it's like, oh, okay, if you do something great, I'll do something back for you just to help you out. It wasn't a part of the system as a whole. Now it's literally ingrained in the system as a result of several different Supreme Court decisions.
yeah, I mean that's true, but I mean I would have to bring up a myriad of political examples. I could bring up a lot of them, like over the whole country's history, where corruption was very present, like extremely present, like it is today, without even any money involved. It's just how it was. Like the money involved now makes it something to where you have to have the money, the people with the money back you to even make it into politics. Back then, people would enter politics with very little money, and then they would be as corrupt in the political dealings as they are now with the money involved. It's just that now you have to have the people with the money involved to get anywhere. So
I would just hate running for president because they bring up so much BS on people. Like, nobody's a saint, by the way. Like, unless somebody's like naive. It's like everybody's got skeletons in their closets to some degree or another. Some people have way worse ones than others. Like for example, islands and stuff like that. Like, I would say it's like up there with the worst of it. But there's always like stuff in people's past, like some criminal convictions or something like that, or something they did when they were younger they're ashamed of. There's always something. And these days, they literally hire private private investigators to go look into your background. Like if you're running for something that's this vicious, they go around looking for literally any scrap of anything they can find on you, and then they amplify that and start running ads on it nonstop. And it's a mudslinging fest. Like it's just an absolute mudslinging fest. Even if you're a decent person, like there's always something like that they can find on you, and they just run your name through the mud. Like it's just so hideous, like the way that works these days. And there's no holding back. Like it's just all the way. So even if you run for something, you'll be out there trying to defend your previous actions. Like even if they were small and everybody makes mistakes, you'll be out there going berserk trying to defend yourself. It's just you have to be willing to withstand all that running for a public office like that. Like you just have to be willing to withstand it. It's going to happen, and it's just an ugly part of it.
And I mean, y'all seen it before. I mean, all of y'all have seen it. I bring up a couple of examples. Everyone else had one scoop of ice cream. The president had two. So and so wore a tan suit. I mean, literally anything. I mean, it could be quite literally nothing, and they'll turn it into something. And that kind of pressure is very annoying to deal with. We deal with that to an extent here already doing this on the channel, but at that point it's become the entire nation. Half of everybody is going to love you and half of everybody is going to hate you, and some people aren't even going to realize why they hate you. They just hate you as they were told to by the party they believe in. But it would be a whole deal. Honestly though, I would like to give it a shot, and I would like to see if some good could be done, but it's an uphill battle, and also it's one where it's like like, I don't know. Like, like, I don't know. Maybe I'll do it.
And And it's like, unless you're planning on running for an independent, which, independents really don't have a chance in hell in America of winning anything because they don't have the party backing. That's not the way our system works here. There is no third party. There's two parties and that's it. Even if you're a popular independent candidate, it's very, very difficult to get elected. You're usually considered a spoiler in the election. You usually just mess up either one party or the other. And that's your sole intent, is simply to pull votes away from one of the parties. That way the other one will win. That's usually what the intent is, at least in my personal opinion. But it's like if you run into a party, it's like the frat house like favoritism crap going on. It's like whoever they like the most, they screw everybody else out of the whole like primary, and they pick the person they like the most. It's like, you have the illusion of choice, but really there's people picking people in these primaries behind the scenes. The only real choice people have these days is who actually, when they put like each party up against each other, like for example, Republican versus Democrat, and you have one candidate going up against each other in the general election, that's the only real choice. In my opinion, you don't really have a choice in the primaries. That's kind of like set from the get-go.
Yeah, it kind of is, honestly. And also, from what people say that I've listened to recently, some people who are honest, you basically have to like bump money up to the political like convention on either side, like for the parties, in like fundraising efforts and whatnot, for them to consider you to really kind of move up the ranks in the parties. It's a whole ridiculous system. I mean, like the political party element is a whole politics game of its own outside of actual politics that you have to play in either one of them. And I mean, I already have a little bit of experience with that. Matthew does too. When I ran for a city council position in my hometown, and I was the same party as the people who were in charge of the town, and because I wasn't in their little in-group politically, they literally did everything to screw me over, and I was only 18 years old. Probably didn't even have a chance in hell of winning the election anyways, but they did everything they could to make sure that was definitely going to be the case. So, it's like, when you get into that kind of stuff, it's like, it's like, I would love to do it. I would love to try and see if the nation could be improved. And if anything, really, to be honest, folks, just try and be a bit of a cheerleader more than anything from the office of the president. Try and encourage people to have hope, to have faith, to look for change, to be the change, vote for the change they look for, don't settle for less. Tell people that kind of stuff, because nobody hears about that anymore. Nobody has someone out there saying that to them, no matter what. We can all make it as a nation. You don't hear that, and that would be a good thing to hear from the office of the president, and it would also be nice to try and do some good for the country from there as well. But getting there is nigh on a very difficult, if not impossible task, especially for people like us, because I'm not going to compromise. Like if they said, oh, if you want to get into office, you can, and we definitely support you, but you're going to have to back off of these things. Hell no. Like, it's like what I think should be done, that's what I want done. I'm not backing off of that.
I see some people saying, well, guys, how come y'all don't just like, go through the process, get the donations, and like, sort of with understanding that, oh, look, we're a part of this system, the way this corruption works. And then when you get in there, then you simply say, I'm not abiding by any of that crap. Screw off. Oh yeah. you're going to find yourself being tuned up. That's what you're going to find yourself in. They're going to be getting revenge on you and tuning you up like you've never seen before. You'll find yourself right in the middle of a brand new scandal that you didn't even see coming, because it doesn't work like that. It operates like basically like the mafia, like to a certain degree. You don't go against the mafia; they're going to come after you. That's the way it works in politics too. It's not like you can suddenly like accept people's money as donations, and then you turn around and simply say, "Oh, I'm just not going to do that." They're going to get even with you.
Yeah, I mean they are going to get your ass good. I mean, like, and that's another thing. Like, you don't take their money and then you just like, ha, screw you, and they're like, oh, that was a good one. Oh no, they're going to take all that money that they just put towards you, towards the other candidate that's going to challenge you in your next election. And they are going to put more money behind them than they did you to run as many smear campaigns as they can. They're going to try and ruin your reputation in the meantime if you do that. They're going to actively go against you. So you really kind of don't have a chance if you take their money and they want certain things done, or they're a certain interest group. Like, say, you get a PAC from the automobile industry. You kind of have to support legislation and actions that are in support of the automobile industry if it comes around. Whenever those sorts of acts come around, you've got to do that, because if you don't and you keep actively going against them, they're going to get your ass. That's how they're all going to work. They're going to put as many slander campaigns, smear campaigns, and everything else that they can against you to make sure that you're not going to win re-election if you're up for it. And that's
Yeah,
that's that's kind of that's
all they
also,
ha-
folks, why you see presidents in their second term depart heavily from what they were in their first term, because there is no chance of being reelected and they're not going to the Congress, so they can kind of do whatever they want at that point.
And all it takes these days is an accusation. That's all it takes to destroy somebody in politics these days. Somebody can show up out of the woodwork saying, "Oh, you did something to me," and that's enough to destroy people these days. That's all it takes. It may not be a true accusation. It may be completely fabricated with the total intent of destroying a person politically, and that's all it takes. One accusation from one individual to simply ruin somebody. Recently, some people survived that, but it's very rare to survive an attack like that. And that's how nasty it gets. I mean, people can just make stuff up on you and just ruin your whole life.
Yeah, and a lot of people believe that outright, especially from the opposite side. So if you're like, say one party, if the other hears that, oh, I knew it, and then maybe some parts of your own party are going to go, oh, I can't associate with that, although none of it's true, and then it's proven to be true, but your reputation's been dragged through the mud at that point. It's over, really. You're going to lose re-election if you're up for it, or you're going to have to resign because the scandal's just that bad. So unfortunately, there's kind of a bit of a caveat to it all, and you either just got to go in there and somehow be a charging Marvin in a sense, and just get everything done and somehow have a shield against all of that, or you got to play the game. And I'm not really one for playing the game. If I have to play the game, I'd rather not play it at all. Is how I kind of look at it. So I hope that does address that. Well, big thanks to you for the incredibly kind words of the support, and I'd love to someday. But I'll have to see if it's even possible, and hopefully it would be. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on the next one.
And we also have another $10 support from Brad Runyon. And thank you very much, Brad, for that $10 support. He said, "I forgot about your music chat last night. And I was a professional choral singer. And if you would like a good mass, check out Frank Martin's Mass for Double Choir, a staple of the choral classics."
Oh, that's interesting, Brad. And I gotta say, I'll have to take a look into that. I do like my particular type of music. And that sounds like it might be up my alley. So I'll definitely have to take a look into that. And a big thanks to you for support, and a big thanks to you for the recommendation. And so with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a 5 from RCH Technologies, and we do appreciate that. He said, "Do like Ukraine and knock out 100% of their fuel. No trucks, no missiles, no troop movements, nada."
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that would probably be the best move to make. It kind of mitigates to a degree the suffering of the citizens to a point, and where the situation is getting worse and worse, and that's kind of on us. But then when Iran goes to the point of no return, it's like, well, that's kind of on your government for not giving up at this point. It's like, because we were trying everything we can, and then at that point we could save grace by going, well, how about a humanitarian mission? Like, we could send the American Red Cross in. We could, try and feed these people, try and make sure that the humanitarian side's upkept. And then if the Iranian government rejects that, it's on them at that point. But I hope that does address that the best I can. And big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on the next one.
Our next one goes to Justin, who puts in a 5. He said, "I wish you could put this toward Razom."
And Are you from? Oh, you're from Australia. I hate that y'all can't support fundraisers. I thank you for the support though, Justin. I wish the folks in Australia and New Zealand could, but for some reason y'all's national laws do not allow it. I don't know what it is about that. But YouTube does not allow people from Australia or New Zealand to support the fundraisers we run, which is unfortunate. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a 5 from Devin DeBro. He said, "My younger brother is now on board the goodness. Thank you very much, Devin, for that support right there. But Enforcer, what say you?"
Boy, man, you're trying to get us in trouble. but big thanks to you for the support, Devin. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And also, generally speaking, this is not like this is not trying to like be like, "Oh, gotcha" or something like that. But folks, if y'all know somebody that's in armed services, please do not broadcast out on the internet. By the way, because there are people that from these hostile countries that watch the internet and they do see it. And if you mention specifically where individuals are, not only you're putting yourself at risk, but you're also putting your relative at risk too. I'm not trying to be like like oh like you goofball. I'm not trying to be like that. It's a helpful criticism with that right there. That's a huge problem today. The military's been trying to cramp down on that quite a bit, but like like people have to abide by that. That's a huge deal with that right there. But moving into our next one, this one goes to Game Theory, who said, "What do you think is worse, continuing the taco and off Iran war to manipulate the stock market versus call it a day and say Iran won?"
Um, you can't really call it a day and walk off because they will shut down the Strait of Hormuz and kind of screw us over. So we kind of have to just continue the war and succeed and aim for victory. We can't really settle for less at this point. So big thanks to you for support. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a 5 from David Brazel, and he said, "Do you think that they would tell us if the Senator Graham, had something bad happen to him from a foreign country?"
Yes, they would most likely. Because it would be something major. And considering that the tides are turning, say the Russians did it, well, that would be important to note. He was an avid supporter of Ukraine, and if the Russians got him, then that would be a rallying cry for the whole U.S. People who are who are for the Russians and whatnot to turn against them because they're literally wiping out American elected representatives. So if they did, if that was the case, they definitely let us know in the public. I would assume. So I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you for support and over the channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a 5 from RCH Technology yet again. And he said, "Why would Russia send 2 big aircraft just to retrieve some diplomats or funeral goers from Tehran? The first plane is landing now."
It could just be because they're important people. Like if it's Medvedev, he was once the president of Russia, so they could just be kind of rolling out like a nice jet for him, to go pick him up. Because they kind of do that from time to time. Even in the United States, from time to time, we do that for some of our higher up government officials. We'll send the 757 out for him, which is kind of close to a Tu-214 in a way. But a big thanks to you for support. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we're on the next one.
And with that, we also have a 5 from Sarah Louise, who said, "Come Wednesday, the small matter of whipping Argentina in the World Cup. Jeremy Clarkson in his Grand Tour tent thinking revenge comes in all different forms."
I'll be waiting to see how that goes. I'm actually very interested in that. And also, just to let y'all know, folks, the current matchup right now for the World Cup semifinals is France versus Spain and England versus Argentina. And I have to say, folks, nothing against our Argentinian viewers, and I am not here to stoke national tensions between the two. But what I said to a friend off air, and I'm going to stick with this on air, is that if America lost, I was going to back England because if anything, considering that we have British heritage, if they make it to say the semifinals and the finals, I was going to back them because if America lost, that's kind of the closest next thing. And also Britain's the most comparable country left that's similar to the United States. They speak English, their culture is fairly similar to ours. So there's enough there relatable that I'm like, yeah, you know what, I'll back England. So, nothing against any of the other countries. The other countries are great. I mean, Argentina's really cool in its own way. France and Spain are also neat as well, but I'm just going to be backing England and seeing how they do. And I gotta say, kind of wild though, I'm not gonna lie, that the US made it to the round of 16. I didn't expect them to make it that far because usually the U.S. isn't known for being good at this. So it's really cool to hear they even made it to the round of 16 right before we're supposed to go to the quarterfinals. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Ross, all the way from Australia. And thank you, Ross, for that 20 Australian. And we do appreciate that. He said, "What are the chances you don't get a day off tomorrow, fellas? The return of Matt's spicy Doritos at last in LLT LSA." And spicy Doritos, you say? That's interesting you mentioned that right there. There are some pretty decent indications that strategic bombers are either on the move, en route, or possibly in theater already, getting ready to hit Iran. That's a very strong possibility right there. The U.S. president made a post today alluding to it. He put up a picture of, I believe, the B-1 and also the B-2 strategic bombers in a post today. And also, we did see some unknown aircraft getting towed into a UK airbase about 24 hours ago. So, seems to me like something is en route, but we're not sure. But Enforcer, what say you?
Sounds like someone's breaking in. Might be on the. It sounds like they might be on the way. There might be some spicy Doritos. And as far as tomorrow, considering that there's a war on, we kind of have to be on high alert. So I have to say this today, folks. I literally just rolled out of bed, got to work, and been sitting around all day waiting for something to happen, just in case. And that'll probably be the case tomorrow. Is that I just have to roll out of bed, get a little ready, and then sit around and wait for what's going to be happening, because that in high alert days, that's what we have to do. Is it boring when nothing happens? Yes. But it's also kind of a bit of a reprieve, because sometimes, like the last time, like we went breaking live a lot, and we would go live for like 6 and 7 hours at a time. 6, 7, 6, 7. But we would do that enough that it got absolutely mentally exhausting. I was absolutely mentally shot after that. During it even, I was completely worn out. Because it takes a lot of mental effort to come up with a monologue to do, and also think on the fly to also make it sound coherent and reasonable, and also think about connecting all the dots on air. That takes a lot of mental work. So, if it doesn't happen, it's kind of a reprieve, but then it's also kind of boring. And then if it happens, it's exciting, and it's good. It's good. But we'll be on high alert. So something might happen tomorrow, and if it does, we will be live. And so a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And now it's finally time for us to get on into the Morse code decoders and the live chats. So what do we got?
So the Morse code decoders were Paul, Kevin, Mason, Joni, Norm, Arabelle, Heroic, Fluffiness, Kush, Koteric, Sire, and Brian. They said the Morse says from the LSA Signal Corps, Iran is getting a little beating for its rude and abrasive behavior, which I support. LSA, and great job.
And thank you. Ding, 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 ding. That's a sound of money for getting that Morse code message correct time and time again in the Lee Springer Stone Corps. Y'all are absolutely incredible at y'all's Morse code reading capabilities. And we are always proud to know that Morse code literacy is something that some people in the Lee Spring Army have. I don't even have it, yet y'all do. It's an amazing gift. It's an incredible one. And I got to give y'all a humongous congratulations once again for getting that right time and time again. And with that, it's time for us to move on into our first live chat of the segment. What do we got?
So this one goes to the OG Wiggle, who said, "What will be the repercussions of this with the Senate and the War Powers Act?"
One second, I gotta play around with your name. My money doesn't jiggle jiggle, it folds. I mean, I like to see you wiggle. You know that one, the meme?
I do. You aren't stalling to pull the War Powers Act, are you?
No, actually, I was actually going to get around to saying I'd have to declare ignorance. I don't know the exact mechanism of the War Powers Act.
I thought you were stalling for him. I thought you were over there tapping away on Google or something.
No. I was literally just like I heard the name Wiggle. I was like, my money doesn't jiggle jiggle, it folds. I was like, that's a good one. I like the name. It's a really good one. But actually, honestly, I wouldn't be able to tell you. Now, as far as the process works with replacing Graham at the moment, the governor of South Carolina is going to. He was from South Carolina, right? I'm very sure on that.
I think it was North Carolina. I'm not sure though. It's one
I'm
of the
pretty
Carolinas.
Sure. Let me go pull that up. Let me go pull it. Lindsey Graham. South Carolina. So he was South Carolina. So the governor of South Carolina is going to appoint an acting senator to take his stay until the next upcoming election. Well, actually, until the new round of senators comes in. So the governor is going to appoint someone right now in South Carolina. And apparently, just to tell you a little bit of what I heard today, apparently there's word that the GOP has told the governor not to pick someone from the House that's a South Carolinian, because they don't want to open up another seat in the House of Representatives, because it's like paper thin margins. If they lose a couple of seats, then they could be screwed. So they don't want to open that up. to possibly being a special election within the House because one of them basically got bumped up to being a senator. So the governor is kind of being encouraged to pick someone who's not in the House to become the acting senator. So the acting senator will stay around until the election, the upcoming election, which Graham's seat was already up for that election, passes. And if a new senator is voted in, Democrat or Republican, they're going to replace the acting senator, I believe, in January the next year when all of those new senators and representatives get sworn in. The acting senator can run in this upcoming election, and I believe that applying for this election opens, from what I heard today, it's on July 21st or the 22nd. So it's going to be here in about a week and a half or so. And once that opens, that acting senator can apply for the election, and also other opposition within that party, which is going to be the Republicans, and the Democrats can also apply to run in that election for that seat. And then the election will come in November, if I'm not mistaken. The election will conclude, the votes will be counted, and then there will be someone who wins the seat. If the acting senator wins the seat, they just go into the full next 6-year tenure as the senator. If they lose, the other person who won is then sworn in, and then they are the senator for the next 6 years. So that's generally how that's going to work as far as replacing the now deceased Graham's seat in the Senate. And as far as the rest of that works with the War Powers Act, the acting senator is going to be involved in making votes on the War Powers Act. So it really will have no effect, rather than Lindsey Graham will not be the one making the vote. It's now going to be this new acting senator, whoever is picked by the governor of South Carolina. So I hope that answers the question the best I can. And Matthew, do you have anything different from that?
I think what he meant to say in his question right there is he meant to say, since the Iran war is restarting, what's the repercussions now with the War Powers Act? I think that's what he was asking right there about that. To my understanding, it's not really clear how the executive branch is going to be playing this right here, because technically, in my personal opinion, they're in violation of the War Powers Act. But there's been a lot of pushback with these recent resolutions that the House and Senate has been batting around. They've generally pretty much halted any type of action to terminate current military operations. They've largely held those off for the most part, and they've generally let the executive branch power to wage war go unchecked right now. Now, granted, I'm in favor of dealing with Iran, but that doesn't really affect or have any sway on the legality of it. That's totally separate. So the way I think they're going to play it is they're going to say that the ceasefire and the MOU was the official end of the war during the last phase of it, and now the war is restarting. So it's going to restart the clock. That's what their strategy is right now. They're going to say the president has another 48 hours to notify Congress of military action. Then he has another 30 or 60 days to use the military, and then he has the 30-day withdrawal period to get the troops out of there. I think that's their strategy, but they haven't made that clear right now. I'm just assuming that's what they're going to do. But technically, the War Powers Act's being trampled all over at this point right now. They're basically ignoring it.
Yeah, it kind of is. And also, as far as everything else, the to put it, just to be honest with y'all, the Republicans are scared about losing a lot of seats in the midterms because they're seeing that polling's coming out that's showing that currently the party is quite unpopular. And so the passing of Lindsey Graham has kind of thrown a bit of a lurch into it, because if Graham was still alive, they'd be pretty sure that he's a shoo-in. I don't really think that his senatorial district was really up for grabs. I think there was a Democratic opponent in the district, if I'm not mistaken, but they had like 30% in the polling, so it was nowhere close. But now that he's dead and they put in an acting senator, that acting senator might not be as popular. So the governor has to pick wisely in South Carolina, because apparently from what they're saying, like the word from the Vine is that the GOP is telling him, please pick someone who's good and just have them run in the election, because if not, we might end up losing that seat possibly if he's very unpopular, whoever this acting senator or whoever he or she in this acting senator is going to be. And they're really concerned that depending on how this election goes, the House and the Senate might flip. Statistically, that almost always happens in midterms, whenever a president's less than wildly popular, which is most of the time. And so we could see that the House and the Senate flip generally in the other direction in this upcoming election, which they're very concerned about. And now Lindsey Graham's sudden death is also causing even greater concern. Not getting into the partisanship of it all, but speaking of the mechanics of it and what's been said around the grapevine today, that's what they're looking at, and that's a significant concern at the moment. I saw Hoagie say pick a moderator. You can't go wrong with that. I mean, generally that would be probably probably a crowd pleaser. But you never know. I mean, they might pick someone who's a little bit fringe, and then they could start ruffling feathers. Right now, I'll say this though: the acting senator hasn't been picked yet, and I'm actually quite interested to see who the governor is going to pick as an acting senator, because that's going to be a very interesting look at what might happen in that election coming up here in the next several months. But anyways, with that, we're on the next one.
We also have here a question from none other than Plow Guy, who said, enforcers, have you seen that the IRGC has sent drones to Cuba? And is there any official confirmation from the U.S. government?
Well, I don't think we've gotten official confirmation publicly from the U.S. government, but there's been a lot of word going around about it and a lot of concern. And there is a decent amount of concern to be had. The problem is that with Cuba, they're in a catch-22 if they have them, and that's kind of a threat to us. But if they ever use them, they're going to get curb stomped. It's not like Cuba can really hold out against any sort of U.S. aggression. They have quite literally no armed forces to speak of, and that's not even propaganda or like sales talk and puffery. They literally have nothing. So outside of the drones, at least. So I would say there isn't really any significant strategic threat, but I think the U.S. should make it clear that any further purchases of drones, we're going to consider it to be a strategic threat, and we're going to act on that. That's how I would approach it, so that way we can avoid going to war with them over something that we don't really need to go to war over because it's not that big of a threat, and we can also make it quite clear that if they try and build those abilities, we're going to make them pay for that, at least the Cuban government at least. So I hope that does address it the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
This one goes to JB Najalki. He said, what's the current global oil situation? And a lot were saying mid-July would be a critical time. And is that still the case? And thank you both for the stream.
That is not the case anymore, luckily, because the Strait of Hormuz actually got reopened for a couple of weeks, and a decent amount of oil was able to make it out. So that it hasn't replenished our stocks, but it stabilized them. Our oil stocks are not falling like they were. And let me go check that. Strategic oil reserve levels. Let me go find this here really quickly, because the U.S. Energy Information Administration puts out info on this all the time, and sadly they haven't put out anything for this week. But to show y'all here, kind of like the bleed, this is the bleed that we've been involved in recently, and right now the level is it's down to the lowest it's ever been since it was open, the Strategic Fuel Reserve, in about 1983 or 1982. So it's the lowest it's ever really been. But as you can see here, week over week, just to show this, on the last week of May leading into June, we burned about approximately, let's see here, 20,000 barrels of oil over that period of that week. The next week after that, we then burned about another 11, and that was the last week that they have reporting. They're about to be coming out with this week, but as you can see, the bleed is starting to drop off. It's already dropped off by about 50% during that little reprieve that we got, which of course isn't stabilizing it, but it has staved off the collapse that was going to be predicted to be happening around this time right now a couple of months back. So luckily, we're avoiding a crisis, at least for now. But it also relies on, since the war has restarted, on making sure that the strait is reopened and traffic is truly flowing through it at pre-war volumes, or very close to it, to be able to avoid an absolute crisis where the oil runs out here in the United States, and also in Europe and elsewhere as well, which will lead to a global economic collapse. So I hope that does address that the best I can, and also show the stats to back it. And with that, and also Gilgal said, it's still pretty bad. It's not as bad as it was. I will say that. It's still pretty bad. I will agree, but it's not as bad as it once was. So that's kind of like the saving grace of it, I suppose. But with that, we're on the next one.
I also have a question here from Tornadoes. He said, do you think China will step in and protect Iran?
No, they don't really have the expeditionary capabilities to do that in any meaningful way. And even if they tried to, they would only be able to send out a few warships. We'd smack them around like taking candy from a baby, and they'd be down a couple of ships that they don't have anymore, and they would also be at war with us, which is not good for their trade relations, which is certainly not good for their economy, because it's on the fringe, or on the fritz, really. And so they're not really going to be doing any of that. They're going to take a step back and watch it from afar and just see how it goes. They might they'll indirectly support them and quietly support them, but they're not going to do anything overt or direct towards us aggressively. So I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the fourth to last question of the night.
And excuse me, and we also have a question. I was just stuttering out of the blue. Hey, look, Jack. I mean, I'm in perfect health. Ask your son about if they know about the aliens. Anyway, but moving on to our next one here. This one goes to I'm D. Stevenson. He said, "Will we be talking about the fact that the IRGC is trying to take credit for the death of the Senator Graham?"
Yeah, actually, they did on state TV. Well, they didn't take credit for it, but they said that, he was going to hell and he was being welcomed by the devil. I'll be honest with y'all. I was like, they might not want to say that too quickly. I mean, they might be sent down there very soon to check and see if he's really there. It's like I was like, that's like I get it. That kind of stuff is absolutely tasteless. Like if well, I mean, being a little bit fair here, they're an enemy of the Republic, so if any of their people end up, going out, I usually say rest in piss and whatnot. So I guess from that sense, I could get it. But at the same time, it's certainly not diplomatic talk, although they are belligerent, so we don't really expect it. I would just chalk it up to they're saying that stuff because they're at war with us and they're also radicalized ideologues. But I wouldn't fret too much because sooner or later they're going to be brought to heel. And maybe those people who are saying that sort of stuff will see some justice in an American court someday for crimes against humanity and war crimes, possibly. But I hope that addresses that the best I can. Matthew, do you have anything to add?
Other than it's absolutely sicko what they were saying today. Also, Iran wasn't responsible for his death, by the way. I'm pretty
Oh,
certain
no.
about that. I don't think Russia nor Iran or anybody was responsible for it. Sounds like it was natural causes, unless the toxicology report comes out and then they say, oh, well, there was an unusual level of a certain chemical. It's unusual in his body or something like that. Then I would say they had no part in it. So now, what they're doing is really stupid and unwise because, it's like, you probably don't want to do that because, there's a lot of people that were supporting that guy in America, and all that's doing is making Americans further hate Iran, which is therefore going to create more public support. And then the U.S. president has more leverage to go to war with Iran even harder, which at this point, I would say I'm all for it. Like, I'm for dealing with the problem at this point in any way that's within, obviously the rules of war, obviously. We don't want to become barbarians, but I'm in favor of dealing with this problem head on.
Yeah, I would agree. But with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And we also have one from AJ Virginia, who said, how soon before we enter a war economy to force a fast build to replenish all the multi-million-dollar missiles that are they're being blown up on cheap drones?
We're probably not going to ever enter a war economy. War economies, or a mobilization of the economy, is usually politically unpopular, very politically unpopular these days, because people have to sacrifice the high quality of life that they expect and demand to be able to make that possible. And these days, we've seen that that's wildly unpopular, even in places like Russia. Putin still will not call a full mobilization, and still is insisting that everything's fine and no one has to really suffer or sacrifice anything economically in Russia because it's just that unpopular throughout most of the world. So I don't think we'll ever see that directly. We will most likely see like a semi-mobilization, like a quasi-mobilization of the economy at best, but I don't think we're ever going to see a full wartime economy unless we entered a full-blown world war with, say, Russia or China, and somehow it actually ended up lasting quite a long time, maybe over a year or so. But I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one's going to go to Mystical. He said, did we ever find out where those mysterious missiles that hit Iran a couple days ago came from?
We didn't. It's still a mystery. Nobody ever took credit for it. I think it was a Gulf state. Iran says it was the UAE. Some people say it was Kuwait. And some people say that it was probably maybe Bahrain or Qatar. Yeah, I think it could have been any one of the four. I don't know which one, though. And I wish we had more information to work off of there because I'd love to know who actually did that because that was one hell of a mystery. But with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is like the last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Sharp, who said the targets they are hitting sounds like Gulf War I campaign, in addition to anti-ship, anti-air, and dual-use infrastructure. And do you think a ground invasion is coming if needed?
Oh, a ground invasion is coming if needed. I would say not, at least for now. Not to keep using this answer over and over, but a ground invasion is very unpopular politically in the United States. And given the fact that the midterms are coming around, if they pulled off a ground invasion now, they are throwing the midterms. not like I'm not trying to get political here, but the truth of the matter is that if a Democrat was in charge and they did a ground invasion, they would be throwing the midterms straight to the Republicans. They'd win basically every seat because people are wildly against that. Most people in America have the concept that Middle Eastern wars drag on forever, they accomplish nothing, and it only costs American lives to achieve nothing. And so conducting a ground invasion inside of Iran would be so unpopular, they'd like whoever's in charge, which would be the Republicans right now, they'd flat out lose the midterms. So they're definitely not going to be doing that, at least in the immediate future. They're going to keep it entirely to air campaigns and hope that that doesn't really do a lot to tank the reputation of the party in the upcoming elections. And afterwards, they might consider it, but even then, it would only be limited. It would most likely only be the islands around the Ormuz, and that would be about it. And also, I saw someone say they already threw. Well, that's an opinion. Like what I'm saying here is that, like, regardless whether you're saying they threw it or not, if they invaded Iran, that is clearly such an unpopular option. It is throwing it. Like whether people say that right now or not, or believe that right now or not, invading Iran right now would be throwing an election, Democrat or Republican was in charge or had the majority in the Congress. So I don't think they're going to be doing that anytime soon. Maybe after the election, they might consider that and they might pull that off. But even still, I don't think they would, because that still would be wildly unpopular. And that could lead to a whole bunch of backlash, even in their own party, if they did something like that.
Yeah, it could lead to a lot of backlash, but that's if there's elections.
Oh, there's going to be elections. Like there's going to be
Well,
elections.
and if a war is on and it becomes impossible to hold an election, I'm not saying I'm for that, by the way, but if it becomes impossible, quote unquote, air quote, to hold an election because the country's at war and we're in a state of emergency, you never know.
There's no clause in the Constitution to allow that, though.
Yeah, there's been a lot of stuff recently that hasn't had a clause in the Constitution.
I mean, that's kind of getting also out of the wheelhouse of what we cover on this channel. It's kind of getting into someone could become Hitler kind of territory. Like, we
Oh
don't really
no,
get
no, I'm
there.
not saying that. No, I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying, they see these other countries, like for example, Ukraine in their constitution in Ukraine, they don't hold elections by law during this martial law. So it's written in their constitution. It's not written in our law to do that. But hypothetically speaking, boundaries could be pushed.
Well, yeah, but that would get challenged in the Supreme Court, and then they'd shoot it down. The elections would go ahead. It's like that's how it would be. And we haven't seen the executive just completely violate a Supreme Court ruling, and also the Congress have to challenge them on that, because that would be a whole constitutional crisis at that point. And I don't think they're going to be coming around to that, because I have a feeling that trying to cancel an election would be wildly unpopular, and that probably would lead a
I
lot of
hope
people to
so.
start considering articles of impeachment if something like that was attempted.
I hope the Supreme Court would do the right thing. I hope the people would disapprove of it, and I hope that would never be a hypothetical that we'd ever have to explore.
Nah, it's not going to be. I mean, if that was the consideration, they'd probably be already trying to kick that off and say that right now. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to round this thing on out for the night on that very razor's edge note. Like, I'm sitting here trying to balance it as best as I can. But with that, I thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to cover this with each and every single one of y'all, as we were able to see that 24.6 thousand people were here at the peak tonight. Quite a lot of people, and we thank you all for being here. And 180,000 people have watched this stream before it ended. We are always honored and greatly appreciative to know that we get to run these streams for y'all each and every single night, and are able to cover the major news from around the world. And I also got to give a humongous shout out to the Leaf Spring Army that raised a whopping $2,806 in support of Razom for Ukraine. And so with that, we will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. If there is no breaking news tomorrow, there's highly likely breaking news tomorrow. So when we see y'all tomorrow, we don't know. But if there is a shorter video to be made, Enforcer Matt will be the one making that tomorrow. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, Rom Slava, long live the Leaf Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And a huge shout out to the 180,000 plus people that were here by the end of the stream, and a huge shout out for everybody making that fundraiser possible yet again. Almost $3,000 raised tonight, which is well above the goal, and we sincerely appreciate that, and we know Ukraine appreciates that as well. But we will see you all on Tuesday night we might be seeing y'all maybe tomorrow. Like, there's no telling. Like, it's kind of hard to tell with that. I will say this: on Tuesday, I will be preoccupied with an unfortunate encounter with the doctor's office, unfortunately. So hopefully nothing happens midday then, because that's a very inconvenient time for me. I'll be going through the tremors of all that crap. So I'd much rather be on the air, to be perfectly honest with you all. But that'll be something going on Tuesday. So tomorrow, though, we might be on the air. But if there is a short video to make, I'll be making that midday tomorrow as well. But in the meantime, though, a huge shout out to you all once again. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava, get some rest, and good night.